As the night settles in, so can you. Let us know in the comments, where are you listening this and what is your current time. After that, close your eyes if you like. Nothing we're about to discuss is urgent or even particularly interesting. And let us begin. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither were its brothels. Let's bust some myths right off the bat. Ancient Roman brothels weren't the candlelit dens of luxury and seduction you might see in a Hollywood flick. Forget silk sheets and rose petals. Think more along the lines of stone benches and oil lamps, practicality over pageantry. The Romans were efficient, if anything. So what did a typical day look like in one of these establishments? Well, to start with, brothels, or lupanars as they were charmingly called, were as woven into the fabric of Roman urban life as public baths or bustling marketplaces. The word lupanar itself comes from lupa, meaning she-wolf, a slang term for a prostitute. It's colourful, right? But don't let the playful language fool you. The reality was as gritty as a Roman road. These lupanars were businesses, first and foremost, with a clear economic and social role. They catered to all classes of Roman society, from the lowliest plebeians to the occasional disguised patrician looking to let off some steam. In a city like Pompeii, barely 170 acres in size, there were over 30 identified brothels before Vesuvius turned it into a time capsule. That's one brothel for every 100 or so people, and we're not even counting the unofficial operations happening in inns and taverns. Now, let's talk economics. Prostitution in Rome was legal, or at least tolerated, much like the street vendors peddling their wares. Workers in these establishments paid taxes, and their earnings varied wildly. The fee for a visit could be as low as a few asses. The coin, not the animal, mind you, up to several denarii, depending on the extravagance of the service and the notoriety of the brothel. For context, an average day's wages for a labourer was about 1 denarius. So, a night out could be a serious financial commitment. But let's not forget the business owners, the real brains behind the operation. Brothel keepers were often women or freedmen who had a shrewd sense of business acumen. They managed everything from the decor. Don't expect much more than a fresco or two depicting the services on offer to the clientele list. The most enterprising of them created something akin to loyalty programs, ensuring that their patrons came back for more and with deeper pockets. The social status of those working in lupanars was complicated, to say the least. Prostitution might have been legal, but it was hardly respectable. Prostitutes had their own social tier, occupying a space between slaves and free citizens. Many were slaves or freed women, but some were independent operators who saw the profession as a path to financial independence, albeit a rocky one. Roman society had a complex relationship with sex work. On one hand, it was seen as a necessary outlet for the uncontrollable male libido, a concept that would have Sigmund Freud nodding in agreement. On the other, it was a morally dubious endeavour, often criticised by philosophers and moralists of the time. Yet, the very same critics were sometimes the clientele, sneaking into the shadows of a lupanar after a day of public virtue signalling. The brothels of Rome were more than just places of business. They were social microcosms reflecting the broader dynamics of Roman society. They existed in a world where public and private lives were constantly intertwined, and where the lines between decency and debauchery were blurred, if they existed at all. These establishments were a testament to Roman pragmatism, meeting a demand that was as old as the city itself. So while the romance of Roman decadence might be tempting to indulge in, the real story is one of economic necessity and social complexity. While lupanars were undeniably integral to Roman society, they were far from glamorous. Picture this. Entering a Roman brothel wasn't like walking into a bawdy rendition of The Bachelor, where roses are swapped for denarii. Instead, it was more like stepping into a gritty, dimly lit stone maze with narrow corridors and small, sparsely furnished rooms. These rooms, often barely big enough to swing a toga, were where the magic happened, or, depending on your perspective, where reality smacked you in the face like a cold gust from the Tiber. The architecture of these places was as utilitarian as a Roman aqueduct. Brothels were designed for maximum efficiency rather than comfort, with several tiny chambers branching off from a main hallway. Each room contained a stone bed, which sounds about as inviting as a slab at the mortuary. Patrons had the luxury of using thin mattresses or straw mats, if they were lucky. Privacy was as rare as a senator. Without a scandal, many brothels didn't even bother with doors, opting for curtains or nothing at all. Talk about keeping things open. Now, let's chat about the economics of lust. The cost for patrons varied depending on the brothel's reputation and the services offered. If you were in Pompeii, for instance, and had a few asses jangling in your pockets, again coins, not livestock, you could purchase a brief encounter. For those with deeper wallets, a couple of denarii might secure more exclusive attention. It was a market economy in its purest form, driven by demand and the ever-shifting sands of public morality. As for the earnings of the sex workers, they were a mixed bag. Some were able to earn enough to buy their freedom or live independently, while others remained trapped in cycles of debt and exploitation. Wages depended on their status, beauty, and the whims of their clientele. An inscription found in Pompeii offers a glimpse into their world. Euplia was here with 2 men, cost 2 asses. It reads like a Yelp review, minus the stars and the gluten-free options. Living conditions for the workers were about as cushy as a Roman chariot ride down a cobblestone street. Many sex workers lived on-site, in cramped quarters that doubled as their workplace. The lack of privacy and personal space was the least of their worries. Healthcare was rudimentary at best, and protection from disease was more a matter of luck than science. Yet despite these challenges, some workers found camaraderie and mutual support within the brothel's walls, forming bonds that would make a reality TV alliance proud. Graffiti and legal documents from the time offer more than just titillating anecdotes. They're windows into the lived experiences of people on both sides of the transaction. Take, for example, the graffiti on the walls of Pompeii's brothels. These scrawled messages range from boasts of prowess to crude advertisements for services, and they illustrate a world where anonymity was both a curse and a shield. One such inscription reads, "I had a good time here, thanks to the girl with the golden hair." Kind of like an ancient TripAdvisor review, except without the passive-aggressive undertones. Legal documents, on the other hand, reveal the broader societal attitudes towards sex work. The Roman legal system, ever the bureaucratic beast, dictated that prostitutes had to register and were subject to taxes, not unlike today's gig economy workers. This regulation was less about morality and more about ensuring the state got its cut. It's a tale as old as time. Where there's money to be made, there's a government ready to take a slice. In terms of logistics, running a brothel was no small feat. Owners had to navigate a world of bribes, taxes, and competition, all while keeping their workers and clients relatively content. Those who succeeded were often shrewd business people who understood the delicate balance between indulgence and restraint. They were the original purveyors of vice, offering a service that was simultaneously condemned and consumed by society. If you think about it, they were the ancient equivalent of modern-day tech disruptors, minus the hoodies and venture capital. Yet, amid all this practicality, there was a strange sort of romance to it all. Not in the swooning hearts aflutter kind of way, but in the gritty, raw reality of human desire and survival. It's easy to get caught up in the allure of the past, imagining a world of marble palaces and togas. But the true story of Roman brothels is one of hard truths and harder beds, where the veneer of civilization peeled away to reveal the primal urges beneath. This slice of history reminds us that while the settings may change, the human condition remains remarkably consistent. Whether in the shadow of the Colosseum or the glow of a smartphone screen, the dance between desire and morality, power and vulnerability continues to play out. And as we delve further into this ancient world, it becomes clear that the more things change, the more they stay the same. But fear not, dear listener, for our journey through the lupanars is far from over. There are more stories to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more realities to confront. So stay tuned as we continue to unravel the fascinating tapestry of Rome's most notorious institutions. As we dive deeper into the Roman world of lupanars, let's tackle the societal perceptions and stigmas that swirled around these institutions like the Tiber's murky waters. In ancient Rome, sex work was a curious beast, both ubiquitous and invisible, much like a celebrity at a masquerade ball. Everyone knew who was behind the mask, but few would openly acknowledge it. Publicly, prostitutes were often the targets of moral disdain and societal judgment, seen as necessary yet unsavoury fixtures in the Roman landscape. The double standards were as thick as a gladiator's biceps. While the services of sex workers were eagerly consumed, their presence was simultaneously shunned. Roman writers like Juvenal and Martial had a field day painting them in unflattering hues, as they critiqued society's vices while their own hypocrisies lay bare like an unguarded city wall. Now, let's talk legal rights, or the glaring lack of them. Sex workers were required to register with the authorities, a bit like ancient gig economy workers with a decidedly less glamorous gig. This registration wasn't to ensure fair working conditions or rights, but rather to ensure the state got its tax cut. Ever the bureaucratic beast, Rome was as good at paperwork as it was at empire building. For the workers, this registration meant a formal acknowledgement of their profession, but it also pigeonholed them into a social caste that was hard to shake off. They couldn't testify in court, vote, or marry a Roman citizen, landing them in a legal limbo where their bodies were acknowledged but their voices were not. Navigating this precarious social standing required a level of shrewdness that would impress even the savviest of modern-day influencers. Some sex workers managed to climb the social ladder by amassing enough wealth to buy their freedom, or by catching the eye of a wealthy patron who could provide a semblance of security. Others found themselves trapped in cycles of exploitation and debt, as unrelenting as a Roman charioteer on race day. The ability to maneuver within this treacherous landscape was as much about luck as it was about cunning and opportunity. Culturally, the narratives around sex work were as rich and contradictory as a Roman feast. Art and literature from the era often depicted prostitutes in various lights, ranging from the seductive temptress to the pitiable victim. Roman mosaics and frescoes might show them in scenes of revelry and decadence, reflecting a society that was simultaneously fascinated and repulsed by its own desires. These artistic depictions reveal a culture grappling with its own moral compass, pointing every which way like a broken sundial. Literature of the time followed a similar thread. While playwrights and poets like Ovid and Catullus might celebrate the charms and wiles of the courtesan, they also underscored her as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked desire and social impropriety. The Romans seemed to understand that their society was built on a delicate balance of indulgence and restraint, and the sex worker was often the fulcrum on which this balance teetered. However, it's worth noting that not all depictions were negative. Some accounts acknowledge the agency of these women, highlighting their role in the social and economic fabric of Roman life. They were entrepreneurs of the oldest profession, and their ability to navigate the societal labyrinth of Rome speaks to a complexity that goes beyond mere caricature. These narratives remind us that beneath the layers of stigma and stereotype, there was a human story of survival, ambition, and resilience. Comparing these ancient attitudes to modern views is like comparing a toga party to a cocktail party, different settings, but the same underlying human dynamics. Today, sex work is still surrounded by a labyrinth of legal, moral, and social debates. While some progress has been made in recognizing the rights and agency of sex workers, many of the same stigmas persist, like echoes from the past refusing to fade away. The Roman penchant for pragmatism meant that while the societal veneer might have been one of moral disdain, the underlying reality was one of acceptance and necessity. Sex work was a part of life, much like the aqueducts and amphitheatres that defined the Roman skyline. As we unravel the tapestry of Roman brothels, it becomes clear that this pragmatic duality is a timeless feature of human society, as intrinsic to our nature as ambition or desire. So, as we continue our journey through the shadows of Rome, remember that these stories are as much about us as they are about the past. They're about the enduring dance between society's public face and its private desires, a dance that continues to play out on the world stage, as timeless as the eternal city itself. But hold your horses, because our exploration of Roman brothels is far from over. There are still more myths to bust, more truths to uncover, and more glimpses into the human condition to be had. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of history, one provocative revelation at a time. As we peel back the layers of Roman history, it's clear that the story of brothels is as much about power and politics as it is about pragmatism and pleasure. Let's dig into the political and economic machinery that kept the sex trade ticking along like a well-oiled Roman chariot. First off, let's chat about the political climate. In ancient Rome, everything was political, from the toga you wore to the gods you worshipped. The lupanas, in their own gritty way, were no exception. Political leaders, those crafty architects of empire, knew that controlling the sex trade meant controlling a vital aspect of Roman society, a bit like having your hand on the pulse of public vice. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, was particularly keen on this, he introduced moral legislation, the Lex Julia de Adulteriis, which aimed to promote marital fidelity and curb extramarital shenanigans. But here's the kicker. While he was busy legislating morality, the lupanars remained untouched. Why? Because, in a twist of political irony, they acted as a sort of societal pressure valve, keeping the citizenry satisfied without upsetting the social order. Economically, the sex trade was a juggernaut. It was one of the few industries that thrived regardless of the political winds or economic downturns. Think of it as the ancient version of an evergreen stock, always in demand, always profitable. The Roman economy was no stranger to boom and bust cycles, and during times of economic strain, the lupanars were like the cockroaches of the marketplace, indestructible and always open for business. In times of prosperity, they flourished even further, with more affluent patrons splurging on the more lavish establishments. The savvy brothel keepers, those ancient entrepreneurs, adjusted their prices and services accordingly, always keeping an eye on the denarii flow. But let's not forget the legal reforms. The Roman legal system, that labyrinthine beast, played a significant role in shaping the sex trade. Laws were less about morality and more about control and cash. The government, ever the opportunist, saw sex work as a taxable enterprise. By requiring sex workers to register and pay taxes, the state ensured it got its share of the spoils, an ancient precursor to the modern gig economy's tax debates. This registration process was both a blessing and a curse for the workers. While it provided a modicum of recognition, it also cemented their status as social outcasts, ensuring they remained on the fringes of respectability. Now, onto the intersection of wealth, power, and morality, a tangled web, if there ever was one. The Romans were nothing if not pragmatic, and the lupanars were a testament to this. They understood that wealth and power often danced a seductive tango with morality, each partner stepping on the other's toes. For some sex workers, their roles provided a ladder, albeit a rickety one, to economic mobility. These enterprising individuals understood that while society might shun them, their influence could be wielded like a gladius in a dark alley. Take the legendary story of Scylla, a famed courtesan who used her connections to sway political decisions and gain favour with the elite. Her influence was such that she was able to secure lucrative patronage and navigate the treacherous waters of Roman society with the skill of a seasoned senator. It's a classic tale of turning lemons into lucrative lemonade, proving that in the shadowy world of Roman politics, the line between vice and virtue was as thin as a senator's toga. But it wasn't always a rags-to-riches story. Many sex workers found themselves caught in cycles of debt and exploitation, as relentless as a Roman legion marching across Gaul. The harsh reality was that for every Scylla, there were countless others who remained trapped, their dreams of freedom as distant as the barbarian frontier. The intersection of wealth and power was, in many ways, a double-edged gladius, offering both opportunity and oppression. The broader societal norms of Rome were a curious cocktail of indulgence and restraint. On one hand, the lupanars were tolerated as a necessary evil, a concession to human nature's baser instincts. On the other, they were often scapegoated as symbols of societal decay, much like how modern societies might blame nightlife for moral decline while secretly enjoying a night out. Roman leaders, those masters of public image, often walked this tightrope with the skill of an acrobat in the Colosseum, condemning the very vices they privately indulged in. As we sift through the sands of time, it's clear that the political and economic forces that shaped the sex trade in ancient Rome were as intricate as a mosaic in a patrician's villa. The story of the lupanars is one of paradoxes and power plays, where the human condition was laid bare in all its gritty complexity. And while we've unravelled some of the threads, there's still more to uncover in this historical tapestry. So stay with us, because the saga of Rome's most infamous institutions is far from over. We've got more myths to dismantle, more truths to reveal, and more insights into the enduring dance between power, wealth, and morality. The story of Roman brothels is not just an ancient soap opera of scandal and seduction. It's a mirror reflecting the age-old tug-of-war between societal norms and human desires. The legacy of these establishments stretches further than the shadows of the Colosseum, casting its influence into modern debates on sex work like a toga-clad ghost haunting the halls of history. time to pull back the curtain on how the myths and realities of Roman prostitution continue to shape today's conversations on legality, morality, and human rights in the sex industry. Let's start with the myths. Oh, the myths! They're like historical catnip, irresistible but often misleading. The image of Roman brothels as opulent pleasure palaces is as enduring as it is inaccurate. Hollywood loves a good story, and the notion of lupanars as luxurious dens of vice fits the bill. But the real deal was more grit than glamour. Think more Spartacus than Eyes Wide Shut. Yet these myths persist, feeding into the modern fantasy of sex work as either a glamorous escape or a seedy underworld. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. Now, let's talk reality. Roman prostitutes, whether they were slaves or savvy entrepreneurs, navigated a world as complex as a senator's family tree. They were taxed, regulated, and scrutinized, yet they managed to carve out a niche in the Roman economy with the tenacity of a gladiator in the ring. By understanding their struggles and triumphs, we gain a clearer picture of the economic and social forces at play. Forces that are not so different from today's gig economy, where workers juggle multiple roles while battling for rights and recognition. The legal backdrop of Roman sex work offers a cautionary tale for modern debates. Roman laws, like a stern schoolmaster, were more about control than compassion. Yes, sex workers were registered, but this was less about protection and more about ensuring the state collected its dues. Sound familiar? Today's discussions about the legality and regulation of sex work often echo these ancient precedents, as we grapple with balancing control, morality, and human rights. And the moral compass? It's been spinning wildly since the days of the toga. Romans were adept at moral gymnastics, publicly condemning what they privately indulged in, an inconsistency as old as the Republic itself. This duality is alive and well in contemporary society, where sex work is simultaneously stigmatized and sensationalized. Understanding this historical context helps us challenge stereotypes and question the narratives that persist like stubborn stains on the fabric of society. Reflecting on the legacy of Roman brothels offers us a lens to examine our own time. The debate over sex work today is a kaleidoscope of moral, legal, and economic concerns that would be familiar to any Roman citizen with a proclivity for the lupanar. Whether we're discussing legalization, decriminalization, or the rights of sex workers, the echoes of Rome are never far away. These ancient establishments were not just about commerce or carnal knowledge. They were about power dynamics, social hierarchies, and survival. So what's the takeaway from our jaunt through the stone corridors of Roman brothels? It's that history has a funny way of repeating itself, and understanding the past can illuminate the present. The myths may be alluring, but the realities are far more instructive and urgent. By shining a light on the gritty truths of Roman sex work, we can better navigate the labyrinth of contemporary issues, armed with the knowledge that human nature, like a well-worn Roman road, is remarkably consistent. In the end, the story of Roman brothels is a microcosm of larger societal dynamics, a testament to the enduring interplay between desire and decency, exploitation and empowerment. As we wrap up this saga, remember that the past is never as distant as it seems. The lupanars of Rome may be in ruins, but their lessons endure, echoing across the centuries with a clarity that should make us pause and reflect. And as we continue to explore the human condition, perhaps we'll find that the more we understand about where we've been, the better equipped we are to shape where we're going. So there you have it, a look at the legacy of Roman brothels and their persistent influence on the modern world. It's a tale of contradictions, of myths versus realities, control versus freedom, and the ever-present dance between society's public face and private desires. As we say farewell to the lupanars, let's carry these lessons with us, using them to challenge assumptions, inform debates, and, perhaps, redefine what it means to be human in a world where the past is always present. In the bustling town of Johnstown, New York, where cows often outnumbered carriages, a girl with more fire in her belly than propriety in her head was born in 1815. Elizabeth Cady Stanton would grow up to be a name that echoed through the halls of women's rights history, but first she was a little rebel with a cause, though not always a clear one. You see, Elizabeth had a knack for asking questions that the adults around her often preferred to leave unanswered, like why her brothers were encouraged to climb the social ladder while she was told to learn the art of embroidery. In a world where the word feminism was about as common as unicorns, Elizabeth was already questioning why the unicorns couldn't run the show. Her father, Judge Daniel Cady, was a prominent lawyer, which meant his house was practically sagging under the weight of legal tomes, thick, dusty, and overwhelmingly masculine. Little Elizabeth, with her mischievous spirit and an innate sense of justice, found these books both a treasure trove and a source of frustration. The young Stanton once famously tried to excise the tongues of those law books, metaphorically speaking, because they didn't allow women to have a voice in court. Spoiler alert, her scissors were no match for the leather bindings and the societal bindings of the 19th century. But Elizabeth wasn't entirely alone in her quest for knowledge and equality. Enter Emma Willard's Troy Female Seminary, the first higher education institution for women in the United States, established in 1821. Think of it as the Hogwarts for young women who dared to dream beyond the domestic sphere. Elizabeth enrolled there at the age of 16 in 1831, ready to devour every scrap of education they could offer. While most of the world expected women to learn little more than how to play the piano and faint gracefully, the seminary was busy teaching them mathematics, philosophy, and science. This was the kind of place where the phrase "woman's work" was being redefined with each passing lecture. Elizabeth excelled in her studies, proving that her mind was as sharp as her wit. She loved debating, and was known to hold her own in arguments with her male counterparts, though the notion of male counterparts was a risky concept in itself. Her education at Troy was an eye-opener, a glimpse into a world where women could think and speak for themselves. It was also here that she began to hone her skills in public speaking and writing, tools that would later become her weapons in the battle for women's rights. The seeds of rebellion were already sown, but Elizabeth's time at the Troy Female Seminary was like adding fertilizer to them. She absorbed ideas like a sponge, particularly those concerning justice and equality. But despite her academic prowess, the real world outside the seminary walls was still a place where women were expected to be seen and not heard. This was a world where the phrase, "a woman's place is in the home," wasn't just an opinion, it was practically a law. Elizabeth's youthful audacity and her education set her on a collision course with the status quo. Her home life was a constant reminder of the inequities she would dedicate her life to fighting. Her father, though supportive in his way, once lamented, "Oh, my daughter, I wish you were a boy," after the death of one of her brothers. Ouch. It was a gut punch, a reminder that no matter how bright or capable she was, society valued her less because of a simple chromosomal twist of fate. Now, let's talk about Stanton's teenage years. You'd think a girl with such a fiery spirit would be a handful at best, and you'd be right. She was notorious for her spirited debates and often clashed with authority figures who underestimated her. Once, she challenged a minister's claim about the inferiority of women by quoting the Bible back at him, a bold move that left him sputtering for a response. Elizabeth was not one to back down from a debate, even if it meant ruffling some feathers along the way. Despite her rebellious streak, or perhaps because of it, Elizabeth's formative years were a blend of intellectual curiosity and frustration at the limitations imposed on her gender. Her education was unusual for a woman of her time, but it was precisely this exposure to knowledge and critical thinking that fueled her dissatisfaction with the world as it was. Her mind was a cauldron of ideas, bubbling over with the desire to challenge and change the status quo. So there you have it, the early years of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a young woman who refused to be silenced by the societal norms of her time. From trying to snip the tongues out of law books to holding her own in debates with learned men, Elizabeth was already showing the world that she was a force to be reckoned with. This was just the beginning of a journey that would see her become one of the most influential figures in the fight for women's rights. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the life of a woman who wasn't just ahead of her time, she was practically running a marathon through it. As Elizabeth Cady Stanton barreled through her rebellious youth, she was unknowingly setting the stage for one of history's most legendary partnerships. Enter Susan B. Anthony, the yin to Stanton's yang, or perhaps the straight-laced Lucille Ball to her fiery Dizzy Arnaz. Meeting in 1851, their alliance would become the fulcrum of the women's rights movement, a dynamic duo that would shake the 19th century to its very core. But unlike those glossy tales of instant friendship, Theirs was more of a slow burn. Anthony, with her Quaker upbringing and penchant for discipline, was the perfect counterpart to Stanton's fiery oratory and penchant for stirring the pot. These two didn't just walk into history, they practically kicked down the door. Don't picture them as the demure ladies sipping tea in a Victorian parlour, talking about the latest bonnet styles. Nah, they were more likely to be found plotting how to dismantle the patriarchy over a cup of coffee black, no sugar. Their partnership was formed not out of leisure, but necessity. In a world where women were about as welcome in politics as a cat at a dog show, Anthony and Stanton realized they needed each other to amplify their voices and their cause. Now, here's a fun fact. Stanton and Anthony were so in sync that they even finished each other's speeches. Elizabeth had the gift of gab and a house full of children, 7 to be exact, while Susan had a knack for organization and a passport to travel. You see, Susan was the boots-on-the-ground type, clocking miles like an early 19th century marathoner, spreading the gospel of suffrage. She was the legs, tirelessly touring and delivering Stanton's words to audiences far and wide. Meanwhile, Stanton, knee-deep in motherhood, was the brains, the writer crafting those fiery speeches from the comfort of her home. Talk about a power couple. But don't let the romanticism fool you. It wasn't always sunshine and sisterhood. Like any great partnership, there were disagreements. Anthony, with her focus on temperance and abolition, sometimes clashed with Stanton's broader vision of women's rights. They had different strategies, different styles, and occasionally different priorities. Yet it was their complementary strengths, and sometimes those very disagreements, that made their partnership so effective. As Stanton herself once quipped, Susan stirred up the lions, I stirred up the people. Let's zoom in on one of their more audacious escapades, the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention. Hold on, you might say, wasn't that before they met? Indeed, but this was the spark that brought them together, like a historical meet-cute minus the rom-com soundtrack. Stanton had been one of the architects of this groundbreaking event, where the Declaration of Sentiments was unveiled, a manifesto demanding equal rights for women. The convention was a bold move, akin to crashing a boys' club with a sledgehammer. Seneca Falls wasn't just a call to action. It was a full-throttle rebellion against the status quo. The kicker? The guy who seconded the motion for women's suffrage was none other than Frederick Douglass. Yes, the Frederick Douglass, the former slave-turned-abolitionist juggernaut. His support was crucial, both morally and strategically, but even he couldn't shield them from the backlash. The press had a field day, labeling the convention as frivolous and its attendees as unladylike. The local paper called it the most shocking and unnatural event ever recorded in the history of humanity. Ouch. But hey, if you're not ruffling a few feathers, you're probably not challenging anything worth changing, right? It's easy to idolize moments like these, to cast Stanton and Anthony as lone warriors battling the forces of misogyny with nothing but their wits and a few quill pens. But the reality was more complicated. They worked within a society that was economically and socially rigged against them. Women's rights weren't just about getting the vote. It was also about economic independence in a world where a woman couldn't even own property or her own wages in many states. In fact, the first married women's property laws didn't start appearing until the 1840s, and they were about as common as a unicorn at a cattle ranch. Anthony and Stanton knew they were up against a Goliath of entrenched interests, but they also knew they had something more powerful on their side, the growing dissatisfaction of women who were tired of being relegated to the sidelines. Women were entering the workforce in larger numbers, mainly due to industrialization, and they did not intend to be treated like second-class citizens. This was the economic backdrop that fueled the fire of the women's rights movement. Real, tangible change that was as much about pocketbooks as it was about principle. But let's not sugarcoat this. For every step forward, there were plenty of backward tumbles. Even within their ranks, not everyone agreed on the path forward. The suffrage movement was a mosaic of different voices, some of which were more conservative than others. Anthony and Stanton often found themselves at odds with other suffragists who believed that pushing too hard would alienate potential allies. Sound familiar? It's a tale as old as time. Progress versus pragmatism, idealism versus realism. And let's not forget the elephant in the room, the intersection of race and gender. The 15th Amendment, which granted African American men the right to vote in 1870, was a point of contention. Stanton and Anthony, who had been staunch abolitionists, found themselves in a moral quagmire. Do they support the amendment and wait for their turn, or do they demand universal suffrage right then and there? They chose the latter, and it wasn't without controversy. It was a strategic blunder that cost them some allies, but it also underscored the complexity of fighting for rights in a world that loves neat categories and hates messy intersections. As our dynamic duo navigated these turbulent waters, they continued to push boundaries, sometimes to the chagrin of their own supporters. But for every misstep there was a triumph. Their tireless advocacy and strategic brilliance. Stanton's words and Anthony's network kept the movement alive through decades of setbacks and victories alike. They were the engine of a movement that refused to stall, even when the road was bumpy enough to rattle the teeth out of your head. So, as the 19th century rolled on, Stanton and Anthony remained the unshakable pillars of the women's rights movement. Their friendship was a testament to the power of collaboration, and their disagreements were a reminder that progress is never a straight line. They were more than partners in activism. They were a force of nature, a whirlwind of change that swept across the nation, leaving a legacy that would echo through time. But don't get too comfortable. There's plenty more to unravel in the saga of Stanton and Anthony. Their story is far from over, and the path to women's suffrage is anything but linear. So, buckle up, because this historical roller coaster is just getting started. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the lives of these extraordinary women who took on the world and dared to demand more. The marathon continues, and the finish line? Well, that's still a ways off. And speaking of the marathon that was the women's suffrage movement, let's dive back into the thick of it. The 1848 Seneca Falls Convention wasn't just a gathering of like-minded individuals. It was the birthplace of a document that would shake the foundations of 19th century America, the Declaration of Sentiments. Now, if you're picturing a bunch of genteel ladies sipping tea while jotting down polite requests, think again. This was more like a verbal Molotov cocktail, hurled at the patriarchy with the kind of precision that would make a pitcher proud. Crafted primarily by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the Declaration was a bold reimagining of the Declaration of Independence. It was like taking a scalpel to a sacred text and stitching it back together with a feminist twist. The opening lines alone declared women's equality in the starkest of terms. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Boom. Right there, Stanton was throwing down the gauntlet. The document went on to list a litany of grievances, a who's who of gender-based injustices that women faced on the daily. Denied the right to vote? Check. No property rights? You bet. A voice in the church? Dream on. It was a laundry list of societal slights that would have made even the most stoic of women want to grab a megaphone and shout, "Enough is enough!" But here's where it gets interesting, and a bit hilarious in hindsight. With 68 women and 32 men signing the Declaration, you'd think this show of solidarity would have at least turned a few heads in the right direction. Instead, it was more like waving a red flag in front of a bull, particularly for the press. Newspapers at the time had a field day, churning out columns dripping with sarcasm. One can almost picture the editorial meetings, with editors chortling over their cigars, penning lines that branded the convention's participants as unfeminine and unnatural. Because, demanding basic rights was apparently akin to sprouting a second head. The backlash wasn't confined to just the inkslingers of the day. Many men and women believed that granting rights to women would unravel the very fabric of society. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate that level of hyperbole. Imagine thinking that women voting would lead to the collapse of Western civilization. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Society chugged along, and if anything, it got a whole lot better for it. But let's not romanticize the struggle. While the 68 women and 32 men who signed the Declaration of Sentiments might have been united in their cause, they were also swimming against a tide of entrenched beliefs. The economic and social landscape of the time was anything but forgiving. Women were stepping into the workforce in greater numbers, driven by the demands of industrialization, yet they were still expected to play the roles of dutiful wives and mothers, often without any say in their own earnings or property. Consider this. By the mid-19th century, the average woman's life was a balancing act on a wire of societal expectations. She was expected to manage the household, raise the children, and maybe, just maybe, work in one of the burgeoning textile mills, where she'd earn a fraction of what her male counterparts made. This economic reality was a powder keg waiting for a spark, and the Declaration of Sentiments was more than happy to provide the match. Yet for every forward-thinking Stanton, there were those who clung to the status quo like shipwreck survivors to a life raft. The opposition wasn't just coming from crusty old men in high places, it was also deeply embedded in the fabric of everyday life. Many women themselves were skeptical, conditioned by a lifetime of being told that their place was in the home, not the voting booth. The press, ever the arbiter of public opinion, capitalized on these fears. They painted a picture of chaos, of a society teetering on the brink of anarchy should women dare to step out of their prescribed roles. It was the 19th century equivalent of sensationalist clickbait, and it worked like a charm on a populace that was already jittery about the rapid changes brought about by industrialization and urbanization. In the midst of this whirlwind, Stanton and her cohort stood firm, bolstered not just by their convictions, but by the undeniable momentum of change. The early signatories of the Declaration of Sentiments weren't just making a statement, they were planting a flag in the shifting sands of societal norms. They were saying, in no uncertain terms, we're here and we're not going anywhere. And yet, even as they faced down the naysayers, the movement was not without its own internal struggles. The intricate dance between progress and pragmatism was a constant waltz, with some arguing for a more cautious approach while others pushed for immediate, sweeping reforms. This tension was a microcosm of the broader societal debate, a reminder that the path to equality was anything but straightforward. As we look back now, it's easy to celebrate the successes and gloss over the setbacks, to view the Declaration of Sentiments as an inevitable step toward progress. But let's not kid ourselves. This was a time when the very idea of women voting was seen as a threat to the natural order, when the simple act of putting pen to paper in support of women's rights was akin to committing social heresy. Yet here we are, society still intact, the sky not having fallen despite the dire predictions of 19th century alarmists. The Declaration of Sentiments wasn't just a collection of grievances, it was a clarion call to action, a bold statement that change was not only possible, but necessary. So, as we continue to peel back the layers of this historical saga, remember that each signature on that document was a small act of rebellion, a step forward in a marathon that was far from over. The journey toward equality was long and fraught with challenges, but it was also marked by moments of triumph and tenacity that continue to inspire us today. Stay tuned, because while the Declaration of Sentiments may have been a groundbreaking manifesto, the story of the women's rights movement is far from finished. There's plenty more to explore, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. As we move forward with Elizabeth Cady Stanton's story, let's leave the founding fireworks behind and zoom into her later years, a time when she didn't just stir the pot, she practically set it ablaze. We're talking about a woman who had the audacity to challenge not only the patriarchy, but also her own allies in the women's rights movement. Picture a social justice warrior who, instead of playing nice with the establishment, decided to start a few fires of her own. Stanton wasn't just content with rattling cages, she was more of a tear-down-the-zoo kind of gal. Fast forward to the late 1800s. Stanton had transitioned from the young firebrand of Seneca Falls to a seasoned veteran of the suffrage wars. Her hair had silvered, but her wit was sharper than ever, and she wielded it like a rapier. By this point she had already helped found the National Woman Suffrage Association in 1869. But don't let the name fool you, this wasn't some genteel tea club. Stanton and her co-founder, Susan B. Anthony, had started this organization as a direct challenge to the American Woman Suffrage Association, which they felt was too cozy with the establishment. Think of it as the punk rock version of a suffrage movement, a little less polished and a lot more in your face. Now, let's talk about how Stanton managed to ruffle feathers even within her own ranks. Our heroine wasn't afraid to take on the big issues, and she had a knack for poking at the inconsistencies of both friend and foe. Her radical ideas often put her at odds with more conservative suffragists who preferred a slower, more diplomatic approach. Stanton, on the other hand, was about as subtle as a bullhorn in a library. Take, for example, her views on religion. She believed that organized religion was one of the main pillars propping up the patriarchy. In 1895, she published The Woman's Bible, a two-part critique that didn't just step on toes, it stomped on them with steel-toed boots. She dissected biblical passages with the precision of a surgeon, pointing out how they had been used to justify women's subordination. Unsurprisingly, this didn't go down well with everyone. The National American Woman Suffrage Association, keen to distance itself from controversy, formally disavowed the work. But Stanton stood her ground, unfazed by the uproar. She knew that real change often required shaking people out of their comfort zones, and she was more than willing to be the one doing the shaking. Stanton's later years weren't just about stirring up trouble within the movement. She also took to the pen, becoming a newspaper columnist where she expertly blended activism with a healthy dose of sarcasm. Her columns were a masterclass in wit and wisdom, skewering societal norms with the finesse of a seasoned satirist. Imagine a 19th century version of a Twitter thread, only with a lot more syllables and corsets. In her writing, she took on everything from the absurdities of gender roles to the economic disparities that kept women chained to domesticity. And let's not forget her scathing critiques of the political landscape. Stanton had zero qualms about calling out politicians for their hypocrisy, often with the kind of biting humour that left her readers both amused and enlightened. But while her pen was mighty, it wasn't always well received. Many within the suffrage movement found her views too radical, too inflammatory. They worried that Stanton's outspoken critique of everything from religion to politics would alienate potential allies. After all, not everyone was ready for a revolution wrapped in sarcasm. But Stanton wasn't one to back down. She understood that the fight for women's rights wasn't just about winning the vote, it was about challenging a deeply entrenched system that valued women as second-class citizens. In her eyes, the battle was as much about changing hearts and minds as it was about changing laws. And let's not overlook the economic backdrop that fueled Stanton's fiery rhetoric. By the late 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had transformed the American economy, drawing women into the workforce in ever-increasing numbers. By 1900, around 20% of American women were gainfully employed, many in factories where they worked long hours for meagre wages. These women weren't just seeking suffrage, they were demanding economic justice in a world that still saw them as little more than adjuncts to their husbands. Stanton's columns spoke directly to these women, offering not just support, but a rallying cry for change. So, what do we make of this later stage in Stanton's life? To some, she was a troublemaker, a rabble-rouser who refused to play by the rules. To others, she was a visionary, unafraid to speak truth to power, even when that truth was uncomfortable. Stanton's willingness to challenge both her allies and her adversaries ensured that she remained a central figure in the women's rights movement, even as she courted controversy. Her legacy is a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of questioning authority, and the enduring impact of a well-timed quip. In the end, Stanton's later years were as much a continuation of her lifelong crusade as they were a new chapter in an ongoing saga. Her story reminds us that real progress often requires courage and a willingness to upset the status quo. And as we prepare to dive into the next chapter, remember that the fight for women's rights is far from finished. The marathon continues, and Stanton's spirit lives on in every step forward. So stay tuned, because there's plenty more to discover in the story of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. A woman who didn't just make history, she rewrote it with a flourish. As Elizabeth Cady Stanton's story winds toward its conclusion, it's tempting to paint her as a plaster saint of the suffrage movement, but hold your applause. The reality is far more interesting. Stanton was, without a doubt, a visionary, yet her legacy is a complex tapestry of triumphs and tribulations. Let's dive into the myths and realities of this formidable figure, shall we? Stanton didn't live to see the fruits of her labour. The ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920, a full 18 years after her death in 1902. Talk about a delayed standing ovation. But the seeds she planted were foundational. Her advocacy for women's suffrage was the bedrock upon which future generations built their campaigns. And while her contributions were significant, let's not pretend she was a paragon of virtue without any missteps. Stanton was a human being with all the contradictions that status entails. First, let's debunk the myth that Stanton was an unblemished heroine. While her work was groundbreaking, her views on race were, at times, troublingly regressive. During the suffrage battle, particularly around the time of the 15th Amendment, which granted African American men the right to vote, Stanton and her comrades found themselves at a moral crossroads. She argued vehemently against the amendment, insisting that it should include women too. Noble in theory, but her rhetoric sometimes veered into racist territory, suggesting that uneducated men of other races should not receive the vote before educated white women. Ouch. That's a footnote in history that often gets glossed over in favor of a more sanitized narrative. But it's essential to acknowledge these flaws, not to tarnish her legacy, but to understand the complexities of the time and the person. Stanton's views reflected the societal norms and tensions of 19th century America, a nation grappling with the aftermath of the Civil War and Reconstruction. The suffrage movement itself was not a monolithic block of progressive thought. It was a patchwork quilt of differing opinions, strategies, and priorities. Stanton's sometimes exclusionary rhetoric was a reflection of this fractured landscape, where alliances were as fragile as a teacup on a rickety shelf. Let's also talk about the economic context that shaped Stanton's activism. In the 19th century, the American economy was undergoing seismic shifts. Industrialization was in full swing, drawing women into the workforce in unprecedented numbers. By 1900, nearly 5 million women were employed, primarily in low-wage jobs like textiles and domestic service. This economic reality was a driving force behind Stanton's push for women's rights. It wasn't just about the vote. It was about economic independence and the ability to participate fully in society. Stanton understood that suffrage was a key that could unlock other doors, like equal pay and property rights. Now, let's address the romanticized image of Stanton as the lone crusader for justice. Stanton was no lone wolf, she was part of a pack. Her collaboration with Susan B. Anthony is often highlighted, but she worked alongside countless other women and men who shared her vision. The women's rights movement was a collective effort, a relay race where the baton was passed from one generation to the next. Stanton's genius lay not only in her rhetoric, but in her ability to galvanize others, to ignite a spark that would burn long after she was gone. The myth of Stanton as the all-knowing sage also needs a reality check. She was a product of her time, shaped by the same societal forces she sought to change. Her shortcomings don't negate her achievements, but they do paint a fuller picture. Stanton was a woman of immense intellect and fierce determination, yet she was also capable of misjudgment and narrow-mindedness. Her legacy is a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of questioning authority, even when the questions are uncomfortable. Stanton's life reminds us that history is messy, full of contradictions and complexities. The suffrage movement was not just a march toward progress. It was a series of skirmishes fought on multiple fronts, often with allies who disagreed on the path forward. Stanton's story is a microcosm of this broader struggle, a tale of vision and vigor, but also of missteps and missed opportunities. As we wrap up this historical journey, let's not forget that Stanton's impact resonates beyond the ballot box. Her life's work challenged the very fabric of societal norms, pushing boundaries that many thought immovable. The marathon she ran wasn't just about securing a vote, it was about redefining what it meant to be a woman in America. Her legacy is a reminder that change is a marathon, not a sprint, and that progress often comes with a side of discomfort. In the end, Stanton's story is a rich tapestry of triumphs and tribulations, a reminder that heroes are not infallible and that real change requires both courage and humility. She may not have lived to see the 19th Amendment pass, but her spirit was there in the ink of every ballot cast by a woman's hand. So, as we nod to Stanton's legacy, let's do so with eyes wide open, acknowledging both the myth and the reality of a woman who dared to demand more from the world. A world that, slowly but surely, began to listen. Your eyelids flutter open to the faint glow of dawn creeping over the horizon. Welcome to another day in 17th century Ukraine as a Zaporozhian Cossack. The air is crisp, the kind that tells you it's time to shake off the remnants of sleep and get moving. It's a life that demands early risers and sharp minds. Being a Cossack isn't just about the romantic image of galloping across the steppes with the wind in your hair, but also about the nitty-gritty of daily survival. First things first, you reach for your attire. A badge of honor, really. That iconic outfit, made up of a woolen coat called a kaftan and baggy trousers known as charivari, isn't just for show. It's crafted for practicality, an essential armor against the unpredictably brisk Ukrainian weather and, of course, the odd chance of a skirmish. You have to hand it to these Cossacks. They knew how to dress for the occasion. But let's not sugarcoat it. Maintaining this get-up isn't a walk in the park. Linen shirts wear out fast, and keeping them clean is a challenge when soap is a luxury. Now, let's talk about that top knot, your ozzoladettes. It's not just a fashion statement, it's a literal crowning glory that declares your allegiance and defiance. Back then, the ozzoladettes was as much a part of the uniform as your sabre, a visible middle finger to the powers that be, particularly the Polish and Ottoman overlords who would have loved to see it shaved off. Ah, but vanity comes at a cost. Keeping that lock of hair neatly oiled and combed requires time and effort, and let's be honest, it's not like you can just pop into the local barber shop. Speaking of costs, being a Cossack isn't cheap. While the popular image paints you as a dashing hero of the steppes, the reality is that you're more of a thrifty survivalist. You're responsible for your own gear, and that includes your weapons and horse. A good sabre could set you back about 10 rubles, a hefty sum considering a skilled craftsman might earn around 20 rubles a year. A decent horse, that might cost you another 15 rubles. It's an economic tightrope, and every ruble counts when you're also scavenging or trading for food and other necessities. The morning routine isn't complete without tending to your weapons. Your musket, your trusted companion, requires meticulous care. Rust is the enemy, and you need this bad boy ready at a moment's notice. Powder and shot aren't doled out like candy, so you're constantly aware of the supply. Each bullet counts, and you don't want to be the fool caught reloading in the middle of a fray. Then there's the matter of breakfast. Forget leisurely brunches. You're lucky if you get some kasha or a hunk of bread. The diet of a Cossack is as unpretentious as it gets. Gruel, dried fish, sometimes a bit of meat if you're fortunate. But here's the thing. You eat not for pleasure, but for fuel. Every calorie is a step toward the next battle, the next ride, the next day's survival. Romanticized legends might show you as a flamboyant hero, but today's morning reminds you that being a Cossack is more about grit than glory. You're part of a self-governing, militaristic society that prizes freedom above all else. It's a hard, often brutal life, but it's also one of the few places in the world where merit can outweigh birthright. You came here for the promise of autonomy and a chance to carve your own destiny, even if it means sometimes carving it through blood and sweat. As the sun climbs higher, you survey the landscape that stretches before you, a patchwork of possibilities and perils. The expanse of the steppes is both your canvas and your crucible. It's a tough gig, but someone's got to do it. And today, that someone is you, a Cossack, ready to face whatever this unpredictable world throws your way. As the sun continues its climb, casting long shadows across the steppes, you realize that being a Cossack isn't just about surviving the elements or sharpening your sabre. No, it's also about mastering the game of political chess with a board that stretches across all of Eastern Europe and beyond. You're not just a warrior, you're a diplomat, an envoy, and sometimes a reluctant pawn in the grand schemes of empires far larger than your own band of brothers. Let's dive headfirst into this political quagmire. Imagine you're balancing on a tightrope strung between two tumbling giants, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Ottoman Empire. It's a precarious act, to say the least. The Cossacks, with their reputation for fierce independence, actually spent quite a bit of time entangled in the webs of these two major powers. Why, you ask? Well, because a Cossack's greatest weapon wasn't just the sabre. It was the ability to leverage alliances, like a seasoned poker player with a killer hand. Now, let's cut through the myth that the Cossacks were the ultimate free spirits, untethered by the constraints of political machinations. In reality, they were more like strategic freelancers, always on the lookout for the best deal. And these deals often came with strings attached. For instance, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth found the Cossacks to be quite handy when it came to expanding their borders or quelling rebellions. In return, Cossacks would receive privileges, like land grants and a certain degree of autonomy. But autonomy came with caveats. Cossacks were expected to serve in the Commonwealth's military campaigns and abide by its laws, even if those laws sometimes rubbed against their own customs like a wool coat in summer. On the flip side, the Ottoman Empire saw the Cossacks as useful allies against common enemies, particularly when it came to raids against the troublesome Muscovy or expanding Ottoman influence into the Black Sea region. The Ottomans were no fools. They offered lucrative trading opportunities and military support, a tempting carrot for any Cossack leader trying to keep his men well-fed and well-armed. But again, these alliances were double-edged swords. One wrong move, and the Cossacks could find themselves facing the very armies they once fought alongside. So, while the romanticized image of the Cossack as a swashbuckling free agent is appealing, the reality was more akin to a high-stakes balancing act. Remember, in this era, the geopolitical landscape was as volatile as a powder keg, and one misstep could ignite a conflict that would engulf entire regions. It's a bit like trying to swim with sharks, hoping they stay hungry but not for you. And what about the famed Cossack democracy? Ah, now there's a tale worth unravelling. The Cossacks often held up their system as a model of egalitarian governance, where leaders were elected by popular vote in a council known as the Rada. Sounds pretty democratic, right? Well, not so fast. While it's true that decisions were made collectively, and any free man could technically speak his mind, the reality was that the loudest voice was often the one backed by the sharpest sabre. In other words, influence was often proportional to your swordsmanship and your ability to rally supporters. Let's not forget that this democracy was exclusively for Cossack men, leaving out women, serfs, and other non-Cossacks. So, while it was progressive in some ways, it was also limited and, at times, brutally pragmatic. In a society teetering on the edge of survival, meritocracy meant survival of the fittest. Literally. And while the system did allow for some social mobility, it was hardly the utopian vision that legends might suggest. You see, when power is tied to the sharp edge of a blade, democracy becomes less about ballots and more about balance, keeping enough allies happy to avoid a dagger in the back. So, while the Cossacks might have enjoyed more freedom than their peasant counterparts in other parts of Europe, it was a freedom fraught with complexities and compromises. As you mull over these political intricacies, the aroma of smoke and cooking fires begins to waft through the air. It's a reminder that politics and power games are played not just in the halls of castles, but also around campfires and in the everyday lives of people like you. It's a world where the personal is political, and every choice could have far-reaching consequences. So, as you prepare to face the day's unfolding challenges, remember that being a Cossack means navigating not just the physical terrain of the steppes, but also the shifting sands of alliances and enmities. It's a world where survival depends as much on wit and negotiation as on strength and skill. And today, in the ever-turning wheel of history, you find yourself right in the thick of it, balancing on that tightrope with no safety net in sight. As the smoke from the campfires mingles with the fresh air of the steppes, your day as a Cossack takes a sharp turn from politics to the art of war. Welcome to the midday drill, a symphony of chaos where strategy meets sweat and the dusty plains transform into a bustling training ground. Here, camaraderie is forged in the fires of battle practice, where every movement is honed to perfection and every tactic is a step towards becoming a legendary force on the battlefield. Now, about those tactics. Forget the Hollywood-style heroics, where a lone warrior charges into the fray. The real magic lies in the collective strength, like a band of rock stars whose greatest hits involve strategic warfare. Enter the tabor, the Cossacks' not-so-secret weapon. This wasn't just any old wagon train, it was a mobile fortress, a medieval tank if you will, that could turn the tide of battle. Imagine a circle of wagons, each one bristling with armed men, forming an impenetrable shield. It was defensive and offensive, a Swiss army knife of military strategy. The tabor wasn't just a clever gimmick, it was born out of necessity. When you're up against numerically superior forces, you have to outthink them, not just outfight them. This rolling fortress allowed the Cossacks to hold off cavalry charges and provide a stable platform for their marksmen. Think of it as the 17th century version of a mobile app, simple, effective, and way ahead of its time. Let's not sugarcoat it, though. Life inside the tabor was no picnic. Picture this. You're crammed in tight quarters with a bunch of sweaty, battle-hardened comrades. It's hot, it's crowded, and comfort is about as rare as a unicorn. But the rewards were immense. The tabor could mean the difference between life and death, victory and defeat. It's the kind of high-stakes gamble that defined Cossack warfare. But why all this focus on military innovation? Well, the economic stakes were sky-high. Raids and battles were not just about glory or honour, they were also about survival and profit. The Cossacks engaged in raids not just for the thrill, but because they were lucrative, albeit risky, business ventures. A successful raid could bring back spoils in the form of livestock, goods, and even people. Yes, raids had a dark side. Slavery was a grim reality, and the captured were often sold in markets across Eastern Europe and the Ottoman Empire. This is where the romanticized image of the Cossack as a noble warrior starts to fray at the edges. Raids were brutal, often leaving devastation in their wake. Villages were plundered, and lives were upended. The economic incentives were clear, but the consequences were harsh. It's a far cry from the swashbuckling image often portrayed in tales and ballads. The stories of gallant heroes tend to gloss over the messy, blood-soaked reality of these raids. So, while the legends speak of Cossack valor and daring, the truth reveals a more complex picture. The Cossacks were warriors, yes, but also opportunists navigating a world where survival often required harsh decisions and moral compromises. They lived in a world where the borders between heroism and brutality were as blurred as the horizon on the steppe. As you step back from this midday training, the sweat glistening on your brow, you're reminded that being a Cossack is about more than just swinging a saber. It's about strategy, innovation, and the ever-present tension between ideals and realities. You train not just for the sake of training, but because every drill, every tactic honed, is a step towards mastering the complex dance of war. A dance that demands not just strength, but cunning and adaptability. And as the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the training ground, you realize that today's lessons are not just about warfare, but about the relentless pursuit of survival in a world that offers no guarantees. The stories of heroism might capture the imagination, but the day-to-day grind of a Cossack's life is about the hard choices and the gritty reality of living on the edge of empire. It's about finding a way to thrive in a land where the stakes are as high as the steppes are wide. As you wipe the dust from your hands and prepare to return to camp, the echoes of today's training linger. They serve as a reminder that every Cossack, from the greenest recruit to the most battle-scarred veteran, is part of a legacy that is both proud and perilous. A testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to carve their own path through the annals of history. And as you look to the horizon, you know that tomorrow will bring more challenges and more opportunities to prove yourself in this rugged, unforgiving land. And just like that, the sun dips a little lower, and the Cossack camp begins to stretch and morph into something altogether different from the military drill ground. Ah, the evening, when the steppes are painted with shades of orange and camaraderie, takes centre stage, albeit a stage where the spotlight isn't always flattering. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of Cossack brotherhood, shall we? The myth, as it stands, is a tale as old as time, a band of brothers, tightly knit, a fortress of loyalty and equality. But hold on to your kaftans, because the reality is a touch more complicated. Think less, one for all, and all for one, and more, every man for himself, as long as it suits me. Sure, there was a sense of camaraderie, but it was more like a wolf pack than a utopian commune. This was a society where your place in the pecking order was often determined by your battle prowess and your ability to charm or intimidate your peers. Hierarchy was alive and well, even if it wasn't enshrined in a coat of arms. Take the Starshna, the Cossack elite, for instance. They held sway over the rank and file, doling out orders and, occasionally, favours. These big shots often had the final say on matters of war and peace, and they weren't above using their clout to fatten their own coffers. It's a classic tale of power dynamics, where those on top enjoy the view, while those below do the heavy lifting. Now, let's talk about a topic that's usually swept under the rug of history, women in Cossack society. Contrary to the testosterone-fueled narrative, women played crucial roles, albeit often behind the scenes. While the battlefield might have been a men-only club, the home front was another story. Women were the unsung heroes who kept the wheels turning, managing households, tending to farms, and even engaging in trade. They wielded influence, albeit of a different sort. It's the kind of quiet power that doesn't make it into the ballads but is nonetheless indispensable. Sure, you could argue that women in Cossack society were marginalized, subject to the whims of their male counterparts. But let's not oversimplify. Some women wielded significant authority, especially widows who took over their late husbands' roles in the community. And while they might not have had the right to vote in the Rada, the informal networks they built were formidable in their own right. In a world where alliances could mean the difference between survival and demise, Women's roles were far from inconsequential, and just as the evening deepens, the air fills with the sound of music and storytelling, integral threads in the tapestry of Cossack life. Picture this, a circle around the campfire, each face illuminated by the flickering flames as tales of old are spun and songs of valor are sung. Storytelling wasn't just entertainment, it was a way to preserve history, to pass down lessons, and to forge a shared identity amid the chaos of the steppes. These were stories of legendary Attamans who led daring raids and clever stratagems that outwitted powerful foes. Songs like the Duma, epic ballads recounting heroic deeds, were the Cossack equivalent of a historical archive. They served as a cultural glue, binding the community together and instilling a sense of pride and belonging. Yet, let's not forget, these tales often gloss over the grimmer aspects of Cossack life, the betrayals, the failures, the moral grey areas. Music, too, was more than just background noise. Instruments like the bandura and kobza set the stage for an evening of communal reflection and connection. These musical tales were the 17th century version of a viral TikTok, spreading ideas and emotions far and wide, albeit at a much slower pace. In these melodies, the Cossacks found a sense of continuity, a reminder that they were part of something larger than themselves. As the flames crackle and the stories unfold, you realize that the social fabric of Cossack life is a patchwork quilt, stitched together with threads of loyalty and rivalry, tradition and innovation. It's a society that defies easy categorization, where the myths are as colourful as the truths they obscure. So, while the evening might seem like a time to unwind, it's also a moment to reflect on the complexities of a life that's as rugged as the landscape it inhabits. And as the last notes of a song fade into the night, you can't help but marvel at the resilience of a people who thrived in the margins of empires, carving out a niche through sheer will and resourcefulness. The Cossack story is one of constant adaptation, of finding strength in community while navigating the ever-shifting sands of power. It's a tale of survival and identity, of the dance between myth and reality, and as the night drapes its cloak over the steppes, you know that this dance is far from over. And so, as the night settles over the steppes, the firelight flickers and casts unpredictable shadows, much like the Cossacks' legacy, which refuses to sit politely in the annals of history. The Cossacks, those enigmatic freebooters of the vast Ukrainian plains, didn't just ride into the sunset of 17th century Europe, they galloped into the imaginations of nations, leaving a hoofprint as wide as the Dnieper. Let's dive into how their tale has been spun by the weavers of history, from Ukrainian nationalists who see them as the vanguard of liberty, to Russian imperialists who painted them as loyal subjects of the Tsar. The truth, however, is as tangled as a Cossack's mane caught in a steppe breeze. First, let's unravel the Ukrainian narrative. Picture a nation striving for self-determination, looking back through the mists of time for heroes who stood against oppression. Enter the Cossacks, stage left, riding not just horses, but waves of romantic nationalism. To many Ukrainians, the Cossacks are an enduring symbol of resistance against foreign domination, be it Polish, Ottoman, or Russian. Their democratic practices, however flawed, are held up as a precursor to modern self-governance. But let's not get carried away on the nostalgia express. While it's tempting to see the Cossacks as knights in shining armour, their reality was grittier. They were as likely to negotiate with foreign powers as they were to fight them, driven by pragmatism as much as patriotism. Then there's the Russian perspective, where the Cossacks are celebrated as defenders of the Tsarist realm, a double-edged sword, if ever there was one. The Russian Empire, ever the master of narrative, co-opted the Cossack image, turning these rugged warriors into loyal enforcers of imperial will. Yet the Cossacks' relationship with Russia was less about blind allegiance and more about a marriage of convenience, one that came with a prenup written in blood and gunpowder. Sure, they fought for the Tsar, but often with one eye on their own interests and the other on the horizon, ever watchful for the next opportunity or threat. Now, let's zoom out and ask the big question, what does it mean to be a Cossack hero? Is it the martial prowess, the daring raids, the ability to outmaneuver vastly larger forces? Or is it the knack for survival, the way they navigated the perilous waters of 17th century geopolitics? The answer, my friends, is as layered as a Cossack's kaftan. On one hand, there's the undeniable romance of the Cossack warrior, sabres flashing in the sun, ocelodettes fluttering defiantly in the wind. It's a vision that appeals to our love of the rebellious underdog, the eternal outsider who carves their own path. On the other, there's the unvarnished reality of life on the steppes, one of economic hardship, constant feuding, and moral compromises. The Cossacks were as much about survival as they were about glory. They were opportunists, yes, but also visionaries who understood the importance of adaptability in a world that changed as fast as the steppe weather. It's this duality that makes the Cossack legacy so compelling, a blend of myth and reality that has fueled countless stories, songs, and debates. The Cossack hero is not a simple figure, nor should they be. They are a reflection of the complexities of human nature, a reminder that history is not just the domain of kings and empires, but also of the rebels and the renegades who dare to dance on the tightrope of destiny. So, as you lean back and let the cool night air wash over you, consider this. The true legacy of the Cossacks might not lie solely in their sabres or their steeds, but in their resilience, their ability to adapt and endure in a world that offered little in the way of guarantees. They were, in many ways, the original survivalists, masters of their own fates and architects of their own legends. And as the last embers of the campfire fade, leaving only the vast, starry sky above, you're left pondering the enduring mythos of these iconic warriors. The Cossacks might have been a product of their time, but their story is timeless, a testament to the enduring human spirit, the quest for freedom, and the eternal struggle between the ideal and the real. In the end, the Cossacks teach us that history is not just a tale of conquest and empire, but also a saga of those who dared to live on their own terms, forging a legacy that continues to spark the imagination long after the last echoes of their hoofbeats have faded into the night. Your eyes flutter open to the soft light filtering through your wooden shutters, and you're greeted by the familiar smells of a new day in 1st century BC Gaul. No, it's not the aroma of freshly baked croissant or an espresso shot. Today's menu kicks off with a robust serving of porridge. It's not glamorous, but hey, it fuels your warrior spirit. Your breakfast is simple because, let's be honest, your life is anything but. As a Gallic warrior, you're not just a man with a sword, you're a crucial cog in the machine of tribal defense and politics, a far cry from the barbarian stereotype of wild hair and wilder habits. The morning rituals are all about precision. You don't just roll out of bed and grab a cup of joe. Instead, you start your day with a routine that's as much about mental preparation as it is about physical readiness. As you break your fast, you might have a conversation with your fellow warriors about the latest news from the Roman front. You'll hear names like Gaius Julius Caesar bandied about. He's the one making waves in this part of the world, and not necessarily the kind you want to be surfing. Now, let's talk gear. Your chainmail isn't just a fashion statement, it's your lifeline. Made of interlinked iron rings, it's flexible enough to allow you full range of motion while offering protection against the sharp edges of enemy weapons. It's not lightweight though, so wearing it is like carrying a 10-year-old on your back all day. And that sword of yours? It's not just any sword, it could cost as much as a horse, and in 1st century BC Gaul, that's saying something. Speaking of swords, yours is a Celtic longsword, often over 2 feet in length, and as much a status symbol as it is a tool of war. It's beautifully crafted, often with intricate designs etched into the blade or hilt. But let's dispel another myth. You're not swinging this around like a madman hoping to lop off a head or two. You're trained in the art of combat. You know how to wield this weapon with finesse and precision. You've got a mix of brute force and technical skill honed over years of training. This isn't a hack-and-slash RPG. It's a strategic game of chess, where each move could mean life or death. Your day doesn't start with a battle, but with preparation. You inspect your gear, making sure everything is in tip-top shape. Any loose rings in your chainmail? Is your sword sharp enough to shave with? You're not just being fastidious. A dull blade could very well mean your end on the battlefield. There's a certain camaraderie among your fellow warriors as you go through these rituals. Shared jokes, stories of past battles, and legends of your ancestors fill the air, giving you a collective sense of identity and purpose. You're not just a soldier, you're part of something bigger. You belong to a tribe, a network of alliances and rivalries that dictate the ebb and flow of life in Gaul. Politics isn't just something that happens in distant Roman Senate halls. It's right here in your village, influencing every decision you make. Your chieftain is your leader, yes, but he's also a negotiator, a diplomat, and sometimes a bit of a gambler. The stakes are high and the players are many, and let's not forget the economic realities. You're not just a warrior because you want to be, but because you have to be. The cost of maintaining your gear is significant, and the economy of your tribe depends heavily on warfare and trade. You're constantly balancing the need to defend your land with the need to secure resources. It's a delicate dance, one where a misstep can lead to ruin. But despite all this, there's a certain romance to your life. The tales told around the fire at night, the camaraderie of your fellow warriors, the feeling of purpose and belonging. It's not all harsh realities and bloodshed. There's an allure to it, a sense of being part of something timeless and primal. So there you are, standing in the morning light, fully aware of the day's potential challenges and opportunities. You're not just a barbarian with a wild mane. You're a skilled warrior with a mission, living in a time of great change and uncertainty. And as the sun rises over the horizon, you know that whatever the day brings, you're ready to face it head on. And so, as the sun grins lazily over the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and optimism, you head to the training ground. It's not a short stroll through a meadow, mind you, but a deliberate march. Every step echoes with the clinking of iron rings and the determined murmur of your fellow warriors. The ground beneath your feet is a canvas splattered with the footprints of past battles and future dreams. This is where you hone your skills, where the romance of the sword meets the reality of sore muscles and bruised egos. The training ground is a hive of activity, buzzing with the kind of energy that only a bunch of warriors can muster before breakfast has fully settled. You see your comrades in various states of readiness, swinging swords, javelins, and practicing formations. It's like a chaotic ballet, but with more grunting and the occasional shout that echoes through the morning air. Here, it's not just about who can swing the hardest, it's about who can swing the smartest. You're not here to just pulverize, you're here to perfect. Let's talk social structure. Because, in 1st century BC Gaul, being a warrior isn't just about flexing those muscles, it's your ticket to the top of the social ladder. It's your status symbol, your proof that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. You're not flailing around in the mud for fun, you're securing your place in a society that respects strength and strategy. The better you are with a sword, the more respect you command. And respect around here can be as valuable as the finest silver. Now, while you're imagining all this glory, remember that the shadow of Rome looms large over your tribal lands. It's a good 400 miles to the heart of Rome, but don't let that distance fool you into a false sense of security. Those Romans have an appetite for expansion that's as insatiable as a kid in a candy store. They're not just content with their own patch. They have ambitions that stretch far beyond the Tiber River. And leading the charge is none other than Julius Caesar himself, a man whose name echoes with both admiration and dread. Caesar isn't just any Roman, he's a man with a plan, and unfortunately for you, that plan includes Gaul. He's got his eye on your lush lands, your resources, and the strategic advantages they offer. The man's got nerve, waltzing into your neighbourhood with his legions and his grand ideas of conquest. It's like being at a party and realising the popular kid is eyeing your slice of cake. Suddenly, you're forced to wonder if your tribe can hold its own against the might of Rome. With Caesar's ambition stretching its long fingers toward you, every training session takes on a new level of urgency. While you're swinging your sword and dodging imaginary Roman jabs, let's also chat about the political landscape. Your tribe isn't just a group of people living together, it's a complex network of alliances and rivalries. Your chieftain is doing more than just barking orders. He's playing a high-stakes game of diplomacy, navigating the intricate web of tribal politics. One wrong move, one misjudged alliance, and your tribe could find itself on the wrong side of history, or worse, on the wrong side of a Roman spear. The name of the game is survival, and you're not just surviving against marauding tribes or the harsh realities of nature. You're surviving against the relentless march of Roman ambition. Every decision is a balancing act between defending your way of life and adapting to the ever-changing political tides. It's like playing chess on a board where the pieces keep moving and the rules change whenever Caesar feels like it. And let's not sugarcoat it, the Romans have logistics down to an art form. They're the kind of folks who love a good road, and they've got a network that would make any modern highway system envious. These roads aren't just for show, they're pipelines of power, allowing troops and supplies to move with a speed that would make any Gaulish chieftain break out in a cold sweat. It's a harsh reminder that while you're skilled and ready, your enemy is organized and relentless. So here you are, at the training ground, aware that every move, every tactic, and every drop of sweat is an investment in the survival of your tribe. You're not just a warrior, you're a steward of your people's future. The stakes are high, and the players are many. It's not just about swinging a sword, it's about swinging the odds in your favor. And as you take up your position in the training formation, you know that this isn't just practice, it's preparation for the day when all those hours of training will be put to the ultimate test. You can't predict when Caesar might make his next move, but you can be ready for it. As the midday sun begins to cast its relentless glare over the training ground, you and your fellow warriors know it's time to pivot from combat to council. The tribal council meetings aren't just a chance to sit down and rest your aching muscles. They're the heartbeat of your tribe's political life. Here, decisions are made that could either fortify your defenses or leave you vulnerable to Rome's ever-encroaching shadow. It's less about who has the loudest voice and more about who can maneuver the delicate dance of alliances and rivalries. Now, let's talk economics. Trade is the lifeblood of Gaul, and those Roman coins? They're more than just shiny trinkets. They're the currency of power and influence. You see, Romans have a knack for minting coins that find their way into the pockets of Gallic chieftains. These coins aren't just for buying bread or wine, they represent a tangible link to the Roman economy. With them comes the promise of trade, access to goods, and, let's be real, the potential for a little extra weight in your purse. But it's not all smooth sailing. Accepting Roman coins means more than just engaging in trade. It means stepping into the intricate web of Roman influence. It's like getting a taste of chocolate and realizing it comes with a side of strings attached. Those coins can buy you Roman goods, sure, but they can also buy Roman expectations, of allegiance, of cooperation, and sometimes of surrender. It's a high-stakes game, and every chieftain has to decide how closely they want to play. Speaking of games, let's chat about the Druids. Ah, the Druids, shrouded in mystery and myth, often depicted as bearded mystics communing with nature. But let's cut through the fog. These guys aren't just sitting around in groves chanting to the moon. Druids are the intellectual elite of the Gallic world, wielding influence that stretches from the spiritual to the judicial. They are the keepers of wisdom, the judges of disputes, and the educators of young warriors. Forget the image of a lone wizard in a robe. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of a think tank. Their role in decision-making is profound. They don't just whisper omens to chieftains, they advise on matters of law, war, and diplomacy. When your chieftain faces a tough decision, the Druids are the ones he consults for guidance. They're the strategists behind the scenes, the ones who help navigate the tricky waters of tribal politics. And while their rituals might seem archaic, their influence is anything but. In a world where oral tradition is king, the Druids are the scribes of memory, the ones who ensure the tribe's history and laws are passed down through the generations. But let's not romanticize it too much. The Druids, for all their wisdom, are also human. Their counsel can be as flawed as any, and their decisions can lead to prosperity or disaster. They're not infallible seers, but men who wield power with all the complexity that entails. And in times of conflict, their influence can be pivotal, tipping the scales between war and peace. Now, let's turn to the myth of Gallic unity, often portrayed as a unified front against Roman invasion. The reality, more complex. Sure, there's a sense of shared identity among the tribes, but unity is more a goal than a given. Gaul isn't a monolithic entity. It's a patchwork of tribes, each with its own leaders, interests, and rivalries. It's like trying to herd cats, each one with its own agenda and a tendency to veer off in unpredictable directions. Alliances are forged and broken in the blink of an eye. One day you're standing shoulder to shoulder with a neighboring tribe, the next you're at odds over a sliver of land or a perceived slight. And while the threat of Rome might encourage cooperation, it doesn't erase centuries of intertribal conflict. The dream of a united Gaul is a powerful one, but the reality is that forging such unity is akin to weaving a tapestry with threads that constantly shift and unravel. As you sit in the council meeting, these dynamics play out before your eyes. Voices rise and fall in debate, each chieftain weighing the benefits of trade, the threats of Roman encroachment, and the wisdom of the Druids' council. It's a political dance as much as a military one, and every decision made here echoes through the lives of your tribe. And so, as the sun creeps towards its zenith, you listen intently, aware that every word, every gesture, is a piece of the larger puzzle. It's not just about surviving the day, it's about navigating the intricate web of alliances that will determine your tribe's future. In this meeting of minds, you're reminded that being a warrior isn't just about wielding a sword, it's about understanding the forces that shape your world and having the wisdom to know when to fight and when to forge the bonds of peace. As the council concludes, the conversation turns to the practicalities of trade and defence. The chieftains discuss the routes that bring in goods from distant lands, amber from the north, wine from the south, and, of course, the ever-important salt. Salt is the unsung hero of everyday life, preserving food and ensuring survival through lean times. It's worth more than its weight in gold, and controlling its trade is a cornerstone of economic power. The council also debates the fortifications of the settlement, reinforcing earthworks, building new watchtowers, and training scouts to keep an eye on Roman movements. It's a reminder that while trade is vital, so is being prepared to defend what you've built. The Romans might bring riches, but they also bring the spectre of conquest, and staying one step ahead is a matter of survival. As the meeting wraps up, you walk away with a clearer understanding of the challenges your tribe faces. The world of 1st century BC Gaul is a complex tapestry of trade, politics, and power, where the past and present collide in a dance of survival. And while the threat of Rome looms large, you know that within your tribe lies the strength and wisdom to face whatever comes next. So, as the afternoon sun casts long shadows across the village, you return to your duties with renewed purpose. You're not just a warrior with a sword, you're part of a living, breathing community, intertwined with the fate of your people. Whether in battle, council, or trade, you stand ready to play your part in the unfolding story of Gaul, a story that continues with each decision made and each step taken towards an uncertain future. And here you are, as the sun starts its descent, casting long shadows over this land you call home. The air is thick with the kind of tension that only comes when the day shifts from mundane chores to the serious business of survival. It's time to prepare for the possibility of a skirmish. You're not exactly hoping for trouble, but let's be real. You didn't spend all morning training just to work on your tan. First things first, let's talk tactics. The Gallic preference for ambushes isn't just because you enjoy a good surprise party. The terrain of Gaul, with its dense forests, rolling hills, and winding rivers, is practically begging for such strategies. Ambushes are your tactical bread and butter, offering the element of surprise that can turn the tide of a battle faster than you can say, Veni, Vidi, Vici. In this landscape, knowing when and where to strike is as crucial as the strike itself. It's the difference between a well-executed ambush and a tragic tale of close but no cigar. Now, let's slice through the romanticized image of battle, a picturesque scene of warriors clashing heroically, all gleaming swords and noble cries. Reality check, warfare is less about glory and more about grim determination. Casualties are high and the stakes are even higher. It's not just about who's the better fighter, it's about who can endure the chaos. Picture this. In a typical skirmish, casualty rates can reach staggering heights, sometimes claiming a third of those involved. It's brutal, and those who survive often carry scars that run deeper than any flesh wound. As you mentally prepare, let's dive into the motivations that drive you and your kin to pick up arms. Honor, sure, is a big one, but beneath the surface, it's about survival. The Romans aren't just another tribe looking to expand their borders. They're an existential threat. They bring with them a seismic shift in power dynamics, threatening to upend the way of life that has sustained your tribe for generations. It's not just your land they covet, it's your culture, your freedom, your very identity. It's like being told that everything you hold dear is up for grabs, and the grabbers wear togas. To add a dash more reality, let's talk about the gear. Chainmail may be your best friend, but it's not infallible. A well-placed Roman pilum, those nasty heavy javelins can pierce it, leaving you vulnerable. And those Roman soldiers, they're drilled to perfection, like a well-oiled machine, each one worth his weight in denarii. They've got discipline down to an art form, moving in formations that seem to defy the chaos of battle. Their ability to regroup and attack with precision is a reminder that you're up against more than just another tribe. You're facing a military powerhouse. As you prepare, the importance of geography becomes glaringly obvious. Your knowledge of the local terrain is your secret weapon. You know the hidden paths, the narrow passes, and the river crossings that can make or break a tactical maneuver. It's like having a home field advantage in the world's most dangerous game. And while the Romans might have roads, you have the land itself as your ally. Now, let's not ignore the psychological aspect. The fear of Roman conquest isn't just about losing a battle, it's about losing everything. The Romans have a knack for assimilation. Conquer first, then integrate. They offer citizenship, roads, and infrastructure, which sounds great until you realize it comes with the price tag of cultural erasure. It's not just a fight for land, it's a fight for your people's heart and soul. And so, as the sun dips lower, casting a golden hue over the landscape, you and your fellow warriors gather your gear and your resolve. You're not just preparing for a skirmish, you're preparing to defend your way of life. It's a heavy burden, but one that's shared among you, binding you together with a sense of purpose and urgency. You're not just warriors, you're custodians of your tribe's legacy, standing on the brink of history with the determination to shape it. In the quiet moments before the potential clash, you find yourself reflecting on the stories told by elders, those who've seen the ebb and flow of conflicts past. It's a reminder that you're part of a continuum, a thread in the vast tapestry of Gaul's history. The tales of ancestors who faced similar threats fill you with both pride and a sobering sense of responsibility. But let's not forget the camaraderie. It's not all doom and gloom. There's a certain gallows humour that surfaces when you're staring down the barrel of uncertainty. Shared jokes, whispered reassurances, and the occasional ribbing about who's likely to trip over their own feet first. It all serves to lighten the mood, if only for a moment. It's humanity at its rawest, finding laughter in the face of looming danger. And so, with dusk rapidly approaching, you take a deep breath and tighten your grip on your weapon. The night could bring anything. A clash of swords, the echo of Roman marching feet, or perhaps just a quiet vigil under the stars. Whatever comes, you know you're ready to face it, not just as a lone warrior, but as part of a community united in purpose. As darkness envelops the land, you find yourself thinking about tomorrow. Every day is a new chapter, a new challenge in the ongoing saga of survival against the odds. And while the Romans might think they're writing the story, you're determined to have your say. After all, history is as much about those who resist as it is about those who conquer. And so, you stand poised, ready to add your voice to the narrative, one that refuses to go quietly into the night. As the stars wink into existence above the Gallic landscape, you're finally able to trade the clang of swords for the clatter of dinnerware. The evening feast is a welcome reprieve, a chance to let your guard down, even if just a little. Imagine a room filled with the aroma of roasted boar and freshly baked bread, the sounds of laughter mingling with the crackle of the fire. It's a scene that could almost make you forget the ever-present Roman shadow stretching across the land. Feasting in Gaul isn't just about refueling after a long day of dodging imaginary Roman javelins. It's a social glue that binds you and your fellow warriors together. The sharing of food and stories forms the backbone of your community, forging connections that run deeper than any battle scar. The evening buzzes with tales of bravery and wit, each story a thread in the rich tapestry of your collective identity. It's like your ancient version of a podcast, except the episodes are live and the hosts are more likely to have an axe on their belt. You might think of these gatherings as mere social events, but they're political arenas in their own right. It's here that future plans are laid out, and alliances are formed over a shared jug of mead. The chieftain, seated prominently, listens intently to the banter, gauging the mood and morale of his warriors. There's a subtle diplomacy at play, the kind that would make any modern-day politician take notes. Who knew that a well-timed toast could be as powerful as a military maneuver? Let's noodle on the economics of it all. Hosting a feast isn't cheap. The cost of feeding a band of warriors, even with the low-carb diet of the day, is significant. Think an entire boar, several loaves of bread, casks of mead, and plenty of whatever vegetables are in season. But this isn't just a feast. It's an investment in loyalty and unity. It's a reminder that while swords and shields defend your land, it's these social bonds that hold your tribe together. And in a world where alliances can shift as quickly as the wind, having your warriors well-fed and well-connected is a strategic necessity. Now, let's chew on the legacy of these warrior traditions. The tales shared around the fire aren't just entertainment, they're an oral history, a way to pass down the values and lessons learned by your ancestors. It's here that you learn about Vercingetorix, the Gallic chieftain who dared to stand up to Rome and became a symbol of resistance. His name and deeds echo through the ages, a reminder that even in the face of insurmountable odds, courage can leave a lasting imprint. But let's not sugarcoat the legacy. Despite the romantic allure of warrior tales, the reality is that Gaul's eventual fate was to fall under Roman rule. By 50 BC, after a series of battles and sieges, Gaul was annexed by Rome and the Gallic way of life was irrevocably altered. It's a sobering thought that while the stories of heroism endure, they're also a poignant reminder of what was lost. The Romanization of Gaul brought roads, aqueducts, and new economic opportunities, but it also meant the erosion of traditional Gallic culture. It's the classic tale of progress versus preservation, a conflict that's as old as history itself. As the feast winds down, let's take a moment to reflect on why warrior myths persist. There's an undeniable allure to tales of martial valor and noble sacrifice. They tap into a deep-seated human fascination with heroism and the struggle against overwhelming odds. It's why we still recount the stories of Vercingetorix and other legendary figures long after the dust of their battles has settled. These stories offer not just a glimpse into the past, but a mirror that reflects our own desires for courage, honor, and identity. Yet, behind the legend lies the harsh reality. The life of a Gallic warrior was anything but glamorous. It was a constant balancing act of survival, strategy, and sacrifice. While the tales told around the fire might gloss over the grittier details, the truth is that being a warrior was as much about endurance as it was about glory. It's a reminder that our fascination with warriors and heroes often overlooks the human cost of conflict. As you finally retire to rest, the echoes of the evening stories linger in your mind. You're part of a legacy that stretches back through the generations, a living link in the chain of history. And while the future remains uncertain, one thing is clear. The spirit of Gaul, with its indomitable will and rich tapestry of traditions, will continue to inspire long after the last embers of the fire have died. And so, as the cool night air settles in and the sounds of the feast fade into a gentle hum, you drift off, comforted by the knowledge that your story is but one chapter in the grand saga of Gaul. A story of warriors and dreamers, of battles fought and won, and of a people whose legacy endures, not just in the pages of history, but in the hearts of those who carry it forward. In the chill of early 19th century Maryland, where the air was as thick with tension as it was with humidity, a girl named Araminta Ross took her first breath. You might know her better by her superhero alias, Harriet Tubman. Born around 1822 because, surprise, not everyone back then had a birth certificate. She was plunged into a world where human rights was just a fancy term for not a slave owner. Her birthplace was Dorchester County, a beautiful patch of land. With a grim reality, it was a hotspot for the institution of slavery, Maryland's not-so-proud contribution to America's dubious legacy. Now, Tubman's early years weren't exactly a Disney movie montage. She was one of 9 kids, which, let's be real, sounds like a recipe for chaos. But in this case, it was more like a survival camp. Her parents, Harriet Green and Ben Ross, were both enslaved, and their children inherited this lack of freedom like some twisted family heirloom. The economic engine of slavery ran on the backs of people like them, turning human lives into mere cogs in the wheel of prosperity for the white elite. Cotton wasn't king here, but tobacco sure wore a crown, and its cultivation required a grueling amount of labor. Just imagine if the stock market ran on forced labor. Oh wait, it kind of did. As a child, Tubman was rented out to other households, a common practice that sounds a lot like an unethical Airbnb service. Her jobs ranged from child nursing to field work. One of her earliest gigs was as a nursemaid, but don't let the cute name fool you. It involved staying awake all night to ensure the baby didn't cry, or else she'd get whacked. Literally. She also worked in the fields, ploughing and hauling logs. skills that would eventually make her an expert in navigating tough terrains. Talk about the original CrossFit. Now, let's talk about the infamous brick incident. One day, Tubman found herself between an overseer and another enslaved person trying to escape. The overseer, a man with all the charm of a broken doorknob, threw a 2-pound weight intended for the runaway. Instead, it collided with Tubman's head. This wasn't some metaphorical headache, it was a crack to the skull that left her with seizures, severe headaches, and visions for the rest of her life. And this, dear listeners, is where the legend begins to form. Her visions and vivid dreams became spiritual experiences, guiding her decisions. Don't let anyone tell you she was born a hero. She was forged into one through pain and perseverance. The incident also gifted her with a resilience that would defy the very laws of human endurance. This was a time when medical care for enslaved people was as rare as a unicorn sighting. Yet Tubman survived and adapted. Her toughness became legendary, and she would later use this grit to lead countless others to freedom. But let's not romanticize it too much. This was not a superhero origin story written by Marvel. This was the harsh reality of a life lived under constant oppression. You see, Harriet's life was a testament to the absurdity of owning people, a practice that was as economically convenient as it was morally bankrupt. Maryland's slave-owning elite were like the Silicon Valley moguls of their time, but instead of coding, they traded in human lives. The value of a slave varied, but an able-bodied male could fetch around $1,200, roughly equivalent to $36,000 today. It's a grotesque number that highlights the twisted economics of human commodification. Tubman's life was a defiant stand against this system. Each step she took toward freedom was a slap in the face of this absurdity. As she grew, Tubman was shaped by these experiences, her body and spirit toughened by the brutality she endured. She wasn't born with a roadmap to freedom in her pocket. Instead, she learned from the land, its paths etched into her memory, each scar a reminder of her journey. And while the myth of a ready-made hero is appealing, the truth is far more inspiring. Harriet Tubman became a legend not because she was destined to be one, but because she chose to be, despite every obstacle thrown her way. In the grand tapestry of history, Harriet Tubman is often painted as a lone ranger, but her story was part of a much larger narrative of resistance and resilience. She was a product of her time, yes, but she was also an extraordinary disruptor of it. Her early life in Maryland set the stage for a future that would see her become the Moses of her people, guiding them to a promised land. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let's leave young Harriet in the fields and forests of Maryland, where the seeds of rebellion were quietly taking root, one headache at a time. As if rehearsing for an epic adventure she couldn't yet name, Harriet Tubman, then still known as Minty, honed her skills in the labyrinthine woods and fields of Maryland. Fast forward to 1849, and the stakes had grown higher than a squirrel in a redwood. This was the year she decided that living on the edge of freedom wasn't enough. She had to leap into its unknown expanse. The decision to escape was not a spur-of-the-moment impulse, like deciding between a latte or cappuccino. It was a calculated risk, like playing chess with your life on the line. Tubman had already faced the psychological warfare of slavery, family members sold away, sleepless nights, and the constant threat of violence. The moment had come to act, and she wasn't waiting for a better offer. So how does one plan an escape worthy of a Hollywood thriller without the luxury of a script or special effects? For starters, Tubman knew she'd have to navigate through 90 miles of hostile territory, a trek that would test every ounce of her resilience and cunning. The journey was akin to an extreme sport, but with the added challenge of dodging bounty hunters and their bloodhounds. The prize at the end? Freedom, a concept as foreign as the idea of owning another human should have been. The route to freedom, famously mislabeled as the Underground Railroad, wasn't a network of secret tunnels or a magical train that whisked you away from bondage. Nope, it was a series of safe houses and brave souls who risked everything to defy the laws of the land. Let's be clear. The only rails involved were the metaphorical kind, and the only tunnels were the ones Tubman carved through the darkness of night. Her first step was a solo act, slipping away from the plantation like a shadow cutting through the moonlight. With her was an iron will and the weight of 1,000 dreams. Tubman was well aware that as a fugitive she was about as welcome in Maryland as a cat in a dog park. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 made the North a risky destination, but it was the only option on the table. Tubman didn't journey alone for long. Along the way, she was aided by a clandestine network of abolitionists, Quakers, and fellow freedom seekers. Think of them as the original social network, but instead of likes and retweets, their currency was silence and solidarity. One of her first stops was the home of a free black couple, pivotal allies who provided her with food, shelter, and the kind of encouragement that doesn't come from a motivational poster. The trip was a game of hide and seek on a grand scale, with Tubman slipping through forests, crossing rivers, and avoiding roads where slave catchers prowled like vultures. She travelled mostly by night, following the North Star, a celestial GPS that didn't come with turn-by-turn directions, but was reliable nonetheless. This wasn't just a stroll under the stars, it was survival in its rawest form. At one point, Tubman had to cross the mighty Delaware River, a daunting task even for the most seasoned adventurer. There were no bridges, no ferries, just her determination and the fragile hope that the water wouldn't betray her. She pressed on, her clothes wet and heavy, her spirit unyielded by the elements. As Tubman pushed northward, she found refuge in the homes of abolitionists who treated her with a dignity that had been denied her for so long. These were people who understood the moral rot at the heart of slavery and were willing to put their lives on the line to oppose it. They weren't doing this for glory or fame. They were doing it because it was right. The price on Tubman's head during her escape was a staggering 100 bounty, a small fortune at the time, especially when you consider that $100 in 1849 is roughly equivalent to $3,200 today. This wasn't just a bounty. It was a testament to how much the system feared a single woman's courage. But let's not romanticize this journey too much. The reality was a grueling slog through mud and fear, with each step a gamble against capture. There were no guarantees, no safety nets. Tubman had to rely on her quick wits and the kindness of strangers, a precarious lifeline that could snap at any moment. By the time Tubman reached the relative safety of Pennsylvania, she'd completed a journey that would have left most of us gasping for air and searching for the nearest spar. But this was only the beginning for Tubman. Her first successful escape was a victory lap of sorts, an act of defiance that set the stage for something much larger. In the land of the free, Tubman found not just safety, but a calling. Her escape wasn't the end of her story, but the prologue to a life dedicated to liberation. She'd go on to become one of the most famous conductors of the Underground Railroad, leading countless others to freedom with the same resolve that fueled her own escape. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, picture Tubman stepping into Pennsylvania, a state that, despite its own flaws, represented a world of possibilities. She'd crossed the line from bondage to freedom, but her journey was far from over. This was a woman who refused to be defined by the chains that once held her, a woman who would go on to redefine what it meant to be truly free. As we leave Harriet Tubman at this pivotal moment, remember that this was more than just a personal triumph. It was a challenge to a system that thrived on oppression and a beacon of hope for those still trapped in its clutches. Tubman's journey was a testament to the power of one person's courage to change the course of history, a story that would only grow more remarkable with each passing year. Stay tuned, because the legend of Harriet Tubman is just warming up. As Harriet Tubman stepped into the land of the free, she wasn't looking for a comfortable chair and a cup of tea. Freedom felt less like a destination and more like a call to action. She'd tasted liberty, and now she was hungry to serve it up to others still shackled by the chains of slavery. Let's pause to appreciate the audacity here. Tubman wasn't content with just saving herself. Nope, she was going back into the very jaws of danger. This wasn't some adrenaline junkie's thrill ride, it was a calculated assault on an entire system. Harriet Tubman was about to become the ultimate travel guide on the Underground Railroad, and trust me, her tours were anything but leisurely. When we talk about Tubman's epic journeys south, we're looking at least 13 trips into the heart of darkness, rescuing over 70 people from the clutches of slavery. Now, if you think organizing a family road trip is tough, imagine coordinating a covert operation where the stakes are freedom or death. Her missions were a logistical nightmare wrapped in a cloak of secrecy. Forget Google Maps. Tubman's navigation was all about intuition and that trusty North Star. The economics of these rescues were as complex as they were dangerous. Each trip required funds for food, clothing, and sometimes bribes. We're talking about a couple of $100 per mission, a small fortune back then, and while $200 might sound like a bargain today, it was a king's ransom in the 1850s. Tubman scraped together funds from abolitionist networks, personal savings, and donations from sympathetic souls who knew the true cost of freedom. But let's not forget the absurdity of it all. Despite being one of the most wanted women in America, Tubman managed to keep her freedom tours under the radar. The wanted posters circulating with her description were laughably ineffective. They described her as illiterate and of average height, with a $40,000 bounty on her head by today's standards. Yet she remained uncaptured, slipping past slave catchers like a ghost in the night. The only thing they managed to catch was a bad case of disbelief. Tubman's strategic genius was undeniable. She employed a series of tricks and tactics that would make a master spy proud. For instance, she'd leave on Saturday nights when news wouldn't spread until Monday morning due to the Sunday rest day. She also cleverly changed her routes, never using the same path twice, and disguised herself in various costumes, from old men to middle-aged women. Her ability to adapt and improvise was nothing short of extraordinary. And let's talk about her sense of humor. In the face of life-threatening danger, Tubman often used humor as a coping mechanism. She once tricked a potential captor by pretending to read a newspaper, a brilliant bluff since she was indeed illiterate. It was like pulling a Jedi mind trick, except with more grit and fewer lightsabers. Tubman's missions weren't just about the people she rescued. They were a direct challenge to the institution of slavery and a rallying cry for the abolitionist movement. Each successful rescue was a thumb in the eye of slaveholders and a beacon of hope for those still in bondage. Her bravery inspired others to join the cause, amplifying her impact beyond the individuals she physically guided to freedom. But let's not sugarcoat it. These journeys were brutal. Tubman faced the constant threat of betrayal, harsh weather conditions, and the ever-present danger of capture. She was leading groups of terrified, exhausted people, often including children, through wilderness and swamps, relying on her wits and a network of allies for safety. The weight of responsibility was immense, but Tubman's resolve was unbreakable. Her actions also had economic ramifications. Every enslaved person she freed represented a financial loss to their so-called owners. In an era where slaves were considered property, Tubman's rescues were not just acts of compassion, but economic sabotage. Each freed individual chipped away at the foundation of a system built on human misery. As Tubman continued her missions, she became not only a symbol of resistance, but also a legend in her own time. Her exploits were whispered in hushed tones among the enslaved and sung in praises by abolitionists. She was the embodiment of defiance against an unjust system, a living testament to the power of individual courage. In the grand tapestry of history, Harriet Tubman was weaving a narrative that defied the status quo. Her relentless pursuit of freedom for herself and others was a direct challenge to societal norms. Tubman wasn't just fighting for freedom, she was redefining what it meant, one perilous journey at a time. As we leave Harriet Tubman plotting her next daring mission, remember that her story is more than just a series of thrilling escapes. It's a testament to the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be a passive participant in her own life. Tubman's life was a masterclass in courage, strategy, and an unyielding commitment to justice. Her legend continues to grow, inspiring new generations with the timeless lesson that true freedom is worth any risk. Stay tuned, because Harriet's story is far from over and the stakes are about to get even higher. As Harriet Tubman prepared to push the boundaries of her daring escapades even further, the winds of war were stirring. Enter the Civil War, a conflict that would shake America to its core and, ironically, open new doors for Tubman to unleash her formidable talents. Now, you might think Tubman would be content to sit this one out, having already risked life and limb on the Underground Railroad. But Harriet wasn't the type to rest on her laurels, or anything else for that matter. When the Union needed people who knew the South's landscape like the back of their hand, Tubman was the obvious choice. Forget knitting socks for soldiers, Harriet was about to wage a one-woman intelligence war. She became a spy, a scout, and yes, a nurse when needed, because multitasking was apparently her middle name. The Union Army was lucky to have her, not that they seemed to fully grasp her worth. Let's talk about one of her most audacious feats, the Combahee River Raid. Picture this. June 2, 1863. Tubman, working alongside Colonel James Montgomery, orchestrated a raid on the Combahee River in South Carolina. Their mission? To disrupt Confederate supply lines and, oh yeah, liberate slaves. No pressure, right? With Tubman's meticulous planning, they pulled off a surprise attack, using Union gunboats to navigate the river under the cover of night. It was a tactical masterpiece, executed with the precision of a military genius. Now, here comes the jaw-dropping part. Tubman and the Union forces freed over 700 slaves in a single operation. Yes, you heard that right. 700 souls unshackled in one glorious sweep. To put it in perspective, that's like liberating an entire high school's worth of students, except with much higher stakes and no yearbook photos. And this wasn't just a feel-good moment, it was a serious blow to the Confederate war effort, as it deprived them of labor and morale. The Combahee River raid was more than just a tactical victory, it was a seismic shift in the war's dynamics. Tubman's involvement proved that intelligence and cunning could triumph over brute force. It was a testament to the power of strategic planning and the impact that one person, backed by a resolute team, could have on the course of history. It was also a stark reminder that the fight for freedom was as multifaceted as it was relentless. Despite her monumental contributions, Tubman wasn't exactly showered with accolades or paychecks. Throughout her service, Tubman was paid a grand total of $0 from the government, a glaring oversight that reflected the era's rampant racial and gender biases. Meanwhile, her male counterparts were pulling in $13 a month, a sum that might cover a pair of boots if you were lucky. Tubman had to rely on the support of abolitionist networks and her own resourcefulness to survive. It was a sobering reality that underscored the inequities of the time. But Tubman was no stranger to adversity. She soldiered on, driven by a sense of duty that transcended any paycheck. Her work as a nurse was equally critical, tending to wounded soldiers and teaching newly freed slaves how to survive in a world they've been kept from for so long. Talking about a crash course in freedom. Tubman was the instructor, the curriculum, and the final exam rolled into one. Meanwhile, the economic realities of the war were reshaping the nation. The South's economy, heavily reliant on slave labor, was crumbling under the dual pressures of emancipation and military defeat. Tubman's raids weren't just about freeing individuals. They were acts of economic sabotage, targeting the very foundations of the Confederate economy. Each liberated plantation was a financial hit, a small victory in the larger battle to end slavery. Now, let's dispel a myth or two. Tubman is often romanticized as a lone wolf hero, but her success was built on networks of allies and supporters. The Combahee River raid, like her Underground Railroad missions, was the result of collaboration, trust, and shared risk. Tubman was a brilliant leader, but she was also a team player who understood the power of collective action. As the war dragged on, Tubman's resolve only strengthened. She continued to push boundaries, defying not just the Confederacy, but societal norms that sought to confine her. Her work was a testament to the power of resilience, proving that courage could indeed change the course of history. Tubman showed the world that freedom wasn't a gift bestowed by others, it was a right to be claimed, with or without official recognition. As we wrap up this chapter of Tubman's incredible journey, remember that her story was a mosaic of courage, strategy, and a relentless pursuit of justice. She wasn't just a player in the Civil War, she was a game-changer, redefining the rules with every daring move. Her legacy, like the ripples of the Combahee River, continues to expand, challenging us to reconsider what it means to fight for freedom. Stay tuned, because Harriet's impact is far from fading, and her story is one for the ages. Fast forward to the post-war years, and Harriet Tubman was still a force to be reckoned with. She might not have been dodging Confederate bullets anymore, but she wasn't exactly knitting in a rocking chair either. No, she was about to tackle another frontier, the battle for women's suffrage and social welfare. Just when you thought she might slow down, Harriet pivoted, displaying the same grit that made her a legend. After the Civil War, Tubman returned to Auburn, New York, where she had purchased a small piece of land. This wasn't just a retirement plan, it was the launch pad for her next mission. You see, Harriet Tubman was never just about escaping the shackles of slavery. She was all about dismantling the entire system of oppression, and she wasn't stopping at the Mason-Dixon line. Her advocacy for women's rights was a natural extension of her life's work, fighting for equality and justice for all. By the late 19th century, the women's suffrage movement was gaining momentum, and Tubman was right there in the thick of it. She joined forces with the likes of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who were as fiery as they were stubborn. Tubman's involvement wasn't just symbolic, it was a practical continuation of her lifelong fight against inequality. After all, Tubman knew a thing or two about the power of determination and strategy. Now, let's talk about the economics of suffrage. The movement faced significant financial hurdles, much like Tubman's Underground Railroad days. Funding rallies, printing pamphlets, and organizing events required money. A commodity as elusive as a unicorn when it came to women's rights. Yet, Tubman and her allies persevered, driven by the belief that the vote was a stepping stone to broader social change. The suffrage movement wasn't just about casting ballots, it was about asserting agency in a world that preferred women to stay silent and subservient. While fighting for the vote, Tubman was also addressing another pressing issue: the welfare of the elderly and destitute. In 1908, she opened the Harriet Tubman Home for Aged and Indigent Negroes on her Auburn property. This wasn't just a charity project, it was a lifeline for those society had cast aside. The home provided shelter and care for the elderly, reflecting Tubman's deep commitment to community support. It was as if she was saying, "No one gets left behind," a mantra she'd lived by her entire life. Running the home came with its own set of challenges. Tubman faced financial difficulties, as government support was about as reliable as a candle in a storm. She often relied on donations from friends and admirers to keep the operation afloat. The home wasn't just a building, it was a testament to Tubman's unyielding dedication to her people, even when the odds were stacked against her. As Tubman's life continued, so did the myths surrounding her. There are tales that paint her as an almost supernatural figure, capable of feats beyond human capability. While these stories are captivating, they often obscure the harsh realities she faced. Tubman's life wasn't a fairy tale. It was a series of hard-fought battles against a world determined to keep her down. Her struggles for recognition and financial stability were constant reminders that the fight for equality didn't end with a civil war, or even with a triumphant raid. Let's clear up a few myths, shall we? There's a romantic notion that Tubman was universally celebrated in her time, but the reality is much less glamorous. Despite her contributions, Tubman spent her later years in financial hardship, often struggling to make ends meet. The U.S. government, in its infinite wisdom, took decades to grant her a pension for her wartime services, a sum that barely scratched the surface of what she deserved. Tubman's financial struggles highlight a stark truth. Being a hero doesn't always come with a hero's reward. Tubman passed away on March 10, 1913, at the age of around 91, a remarkable lifespan for someone who'd spent years in the harshest conditions imaginable. Her death marked the end of an era, but her legacy was just beginning to take root. Tubman was buried with military honors at Fort Hill Cemetery in Auburn, a testament to her indelible impact on American history. As we reflect on Tubman's legacy, let's dispel another myth, that she was a solitary icon, a lone wolf in the fight for justice. The reality is that Tubman's work was part of a larger tapestry of resistance and resilience. She was a product of her time, yes, but she was also a catalyst for change, inspiring countless others to take up the mantle of equality. Harriet Tubman should be remembered not just as a symbol, but as a complex, multifaceted individual. Her life's work spanned the fight against slavery, the struggle for women's rights, and the push for social welfare. She wasn't just a hero in the traditional sense, she was a visionary who saw the interconnectedness of all struggles for justice. In the grand scheme of things, Tubman's story is a reminder that the fight for equality is ongoing. Her life teaches us that progress is not a straight line, but a series of battles won and lost, each contributing to the larger movement toward justice. Tubman's legacy is a call to action, urging us to continue the work she started, to challenge the status quo, and to push for a more equitable world. So, as we close this chapter on Harriet Tubman's incredible life, let's remember her not just as the Moses of her people, but as a pioneer who reshaped the very fabric of American society. Her courage, determination, and unwavering commitment to justice continue to inspire and guide us today. Harriet Tubman wasn't just a legend, She was a force of nature, and her story is one for the ages. The sun is barely warming the horizon when you kick off another day in the heart of the Akkadian Empire, a place where history doesn't just happen, it gets recorded in clay. You're a scribe, part of an elite cadre in the bustling city of Akkad around 2300 BC. Forget the romanticized image of parchment and quill, your tools are far more tactile. You work with slabs of clay and a reed stylus, which, let's face it, is more likely to leave smudges on your hands than the pages of history. But hey, it gets the job done. As you roll out of your clay bed, not really, but it might as well feel like that. You face the familiar chaos of a city that's the epicenter of trade, politics, and more than a fair share of intrigue. The cuneiform writing system, which you know like the back of your hand, is your bread and butter. It's not just a bunch of wedge-shaped marks. It's the language of commerce and administration. Think of it as the spreadsheet of the ancient world, minus the undo button. Every stroke you etch onto a tablet has weight, literally and figuratively. Cuneiform isn't just a series of random marks. Each symbol represents a syllable, and it's your job to make sense of it all. You're not just jotting down grocery lists, you're keeping the wheels of an empire turning. The economy thrives on trade routes that stretch as far as the Indus Valley and Anatolia. You're the one recording the grain shipments, the wool exports, and yes, the occasional diplomatic exchange. In today's terms, you're dealing with the Mesopotamian equivalent of billion-dollar deals. Your morning routine would make even the busiest modern office worker break out in a cold sweat. There are no emails to check, but there's a stack of clay tablets waiting for your attention, each one a snapshot of the bustling economic activity. You'll record the price of barley 10 shekels for a gur, or roughly 300 litres if you're keeping track. Wool might run you 4 shekels for a mina, about 500 grams. These aren't just numbers, they're the pulse of Mesopotamian life. Now, let's talk trade routes. The city of Akkad isn't just a static hub. It's the nexus for caravans and riverboats, where goods and ideas flow like the mighty Tigris. From the copper of Magan, modern-day Oman, to the luxurious woods of Dilmun, think Bahrain, the trade routes are the lifelines that connect you to the rest of the known world. You're not just tracking goods, you're witnessing the cultural exchange that will shape civilizations for centuries. But here's where it gets interesting. The myths versus reality. The legends speak of an empire that ruled with an iron fist, but let's not kid ourselves. The reality is more nuanced, layered with political maneuverings and economic necessities. King Sargon, the empire's most famous ruler, is often depicted as a larger-than-life figure, a conqueror of lands and hearts. Yet, even he relied on savvy administrators like you to keep his empire intact. You're the unsung hero, the one who ensures that when Sargon decides to wage a campaign, the army is well fed and funded. The economic landscape you navigate is as complex as any modern market. Inflation isn't a 21st century invention. Prices fluctuate based on supply routes, harvest yields, and the occasional marauding band. You've got a front row seat to it all, etching these changing fortunes into clay, one wedge at a time. It's a job that requires precision, patience, and a keen understanding of human nature. So, as you sit in the scribe's chamber, surrounded by the bustling sounds of a city that never quite sleeps, remember that you're not just a record keeper. You're a witness to history, an architect of narratives that will outlast empires. Your stylus might be humble, but the marks you leave are anything but. And as the morning sun creeps higher, casting its light over the city of Akkad, you find yourself ready to tackle the day, one clay tablet at a time. Welcome to your world, where every mark is a story, and every story is a testament to the enduring power of the written word. As the sun climbs a bit higher and the city of Akkad hums with the energy of commerce and clanging copper, you find yourself heading toward the temple, that grand stage where the divine meets the mundane in a dance as old as civilization itself. You're no stranger here. This isn't just a place of worship, but a bustling hub of economic activity. Think of it as the Wall Street of ancient Mesopotamia, with a side of incense and divine intervention. Your role today? Recording the offerings and transactions that fuel the temple's economy. Temples in Mesopotamia were no mere spiritual retreats, they were economic powerhouses. The priests, in their flowing robes, wielded influence that would make a modern CEO blush. They're the gatekeepers of wealth and wisdom, and as a scribe, you're their trusted ally. You jot down the details of each transaction, ensuring that the gods and the temple's coffers get their due. Now, about those gods. The mythology is rich, let's not deny it. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, sounds like someone you'd swipe right on for an intriguing date, while in Lyle, the storm god, is the kind of unpredictable force you'd rather not cross paths with on a bad day. But here's the kicker. The gods aren't just lofty beings residing in the celestial realm. They're embedded in the everyday, shaping policies and influencing markets. The city's prosperity is often attributed to divine favor, a notion that keeps the sheep and the shekels flowing into the temple. It's a pragmatic belief system, if you think about it. The gods are part of the social contract. Their temples are the banks, their priests the bankers, and you, dear scribe, are the ledger keeper, ensuring that no one tries to shortchange Inanna. The temple economy is a well-oiled machine, and you're the grease that keeps it running smoothly. As you make your rounds, tablet and stylus in hand, you can't help but notice the subtle power dynamics at play. The priests might wear the ceremonial garb, but it's your job to ensure that the numbers add up, that every offering is accounted for, whether it's a bushel of barley or a finely crafted bronze figurine. In today's terms, you're the auditor, making sure the books are balanced and the gods remain appeased. Let's set aside the myths for a moment and talk about reality. Priests weren't just spiritual leaders. They were savvy administrators who understood the nuances of power and economy. They controlled vast tracts of land and managed extensive workforces. The offerings weren't just spiritual tributes, they were a form of taxation. And you thought your local tax collector was bad. The temple's influence stretched beyond the spiritual. It was a center for education, a place where young scribes learned their craft under the watchful eyes of seasoned mentors. The temple library, with its clay tablets stacked high, was a treasure trove of knowledge, a precursor to the grand libraries of later civilizations. You play a part in this intellectual legacy, ensuring that future generations can learn from the past, even if it does come with a bit of divine embellishment. There's a certain charm in the myths, though, isn't there? The idea that a well-timed prayer could sway the fates, that the gods might intervene in the affairs of mortals. It's a comforting narrative, one that offers hope in uncertain times. But as you well know, the reality is often more grounded, rooted in the practicalities of governance and economy. You pause for a moment, taking in the scene around you. The temple courtyard is bustling with activity, a microcosm of the city itself. Merchants haggle over prices, supplicants offer their prayers, and you, with your stylus poised, capture it all in the ancient script of cuneiform. It's a snapshot of life in Akkad, a testament to the enduring power of the pen, or in this case, the stylus. As you wrap up your mid-morning duties, the temple bells toll, a reminder of the passage of time. It's a cue to head back to your scribe's chamber, where more tablets await your attention. But before you go, you take a moment to reflect on the intricate web of religion and economy that defines your world. It's a complex tapestry, one that requires both faith and pragmatism to navigate. So, you leave the temple, the weight of history and the divine upon your shoulders, yet feeling strangely light. After all, you're not just a spectator here, you're an active participant in the grand narrative of Mesopotamian life. And as you make your way back through the bustling streets of Akkad, you realize that while the gods may hold sway over the heavens, it's the scribes like you who keep the earthly realm in order. As you navigate the bustling streets of Akkad, the midday sun casting its harsh glow over the city's mud-brick buildings, your mind drifts to the man behind this bustling metropolis. Sargon of Akkad. Now, if there's a figure in history who embodies both myth and reality, it's Sargon. His name alone conjures images of legendary conquests and an empire that stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. But before you get swept away by the grandeur, let's peel back the layers and see what really made this empire tick. Sargon isn't just some mythical hero riding into battle on a chariot of fire. He was a man with a plan, or at least a very ambitious to-do list. Born around 233-4 BC, he started his career in Kish, a city that was the Washington, D.C. of its day, before rising to power and establishing the first known empire in history. Sure, he had the military prowess to back up his ambitions, but let's not romanticize him too much. His empire didn't just run on charisma and conquest, It ran on logistics, administration, and, yes, the tireless work of scribes like you. Picture this, an empire spanning roughly 800 kilometers at its peak. That's like ruling from New York City to North Carolina, only without the convenience of modern infrastructure or Google Maps. The Akkadian Empire was a patchwork of city-states, each with its own local rulers and customs. Sargon's challenge was to knit these together into a cohesive whole. This is where the scribes came in, recording edicts, managing resources, and ensuring that Sargon's decrees were followed from one end of the empire to the other. Let's talk logistics for a second, because it's not all about swinging swords and claiming thrones. Imagine trying to coordinate an army across such vast distances. Spoiler alert, it's no small feat. You need food, weapons, and a way to communicate orders. Enter the scribes, the unsung heroes who recorded troop movements, supplies, and the all-important taxes that kept this grand machine running. When Sargon wanted to ensure his army had enough barley to fuel their conquests, it was scribes who made sure the supply chain didn't break down. Logistics before glory, my friend. And then there's the matter of legitimacy. Sargon didn't just waltz into a city and expect everyone to fall at his feet. He had to prove he was more than just another warlord. To do this, he claimed divine approval, a classic move in the ancient ruler's playbook. Inscriptions declare him as the anointed of the god Enlil, a title that sounds impressive until you remember that divine endorsement was about as common as political slogans today. Nevertheless, this celestial backing was crucial. It's one thing to conquer, it's another to rule, and divine favor was a handy way to quiet any dissenting voices. But let's not forget the harsh realities of empire. It's easy to get swept up in the tales of glory, but an empire is built on the backs of its people. Conquests mean displaced populations, heavy taxation, and a constant need for control. Sargon's empire might have been the land of plenty for some, but for others it was a landscape of toil and tribute. The romantic tales overlook the gritty details. The farmers who had to give up their grain, the craftsmen conscripted into endless labor for the state, and who was there to record these transactions? You guessed it, the scribes, ensuring that every ounce of tribute was accounted for. As you approach the scribe's chamber for a much-needed break, think about the sheer audacity it took to rule such a vast domain. Sargon was a master of propaganda, a trailblazer in the art of self-promotion. He even had a city named after him, Akkad, the beating heart of his empire. It's like renaming New York after yourself, but with fewer skyscrapers and more ziggurats. Speaking of Akkad, its exact location remains a mystery to us today, much like the contents of a scribe's lunchbox. Was it filled with exotic goods from the far reaches of the empire, or just another clay tablet with a side of barley? Either way, lunch is a chance to pause and digest, not just your meal, but the enormity of the empire around you. Sargon's legacy is one of both awe and complexity, a reminder that empires are as much about the mundane as the magnificent. As you sit down to eat, the weight of the morning's work behind you, you can't help but reflect on the role you play in this grand narrative. You're not just a cog in the machine, you're the grease that keeps it running smoothly. The marks you make in clay are the threads that weave the empire's story, ensuring that when Sargon's name is spoken in hushed tones of reverence or whispered in corners of dissent, it's your work that underpins those tales. So here's to you, scribe, guardian of the written word and architect of empire. As you take a bite of your midday meal, remember that while Sargon might be the name everyone knows, it's your hand that carved his story into history. And as the sun continues its relentless climb across the sky, casting its golden light over the city of Akkad, you prepare to dive back into the fray. Because in the end, it's not just kings who make history, it's the ones who write it down. As you polish off your barley lunch, you're already gearing up for what comes next, a riveting afternoon of legal debates. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Well, before you start rolling your eyes, consider this. You're about to plunge into the ancient world's attempts at establishing order, justice, and maybe a little bit of chaos control. Welcome to the scribe's meeting, where law meets clay, and every stroke of the stylus could change lives. You take your seat among the other scribes, all of whom are busy preparing for a discussion that could rival any modern-day courtroom drama. The topic of the day is the Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the earliest known legal codes in history, drafted around 2000 run BC. Now, before you scoff at its age, remember that this was the cutting-edge legislation of its time, an ancient attempt to tame the Wild West that was Mesopotamia. Ur-Nammu, the king of Ur, wasn't just some figurehead sitting on a ziggurat throne. He was a forward-thinking ruler who understood that the key to a stable society was clear and, dare I say, coherent laws. His code laid down the rules of the game, everything from property rights to marital disputes. Think of it as the original Law and Order, Ur edition. But here's the kicker. These weren't just arbitrary rules scribbled on a whim. They were meticulously crafted to address the social and economic realities of the day. The Code of Ur-Nammu was written in Sumerian, and it was a step towards what we'd recognize as a legal system. It included fines for bodily harm and theft, and it's believed to have introduced the concept of monetary compensation over the more brutal an eye for an eye retribution. Finally, some common sense, right? Instead of lopping off a hand for theft, how about paying a fine? It's a bit more civilized, though probably less satisfying for those with a flair for the dramatic. But let's not get too romantic about it. The code wasn't all sunshine and fairness. It was a reflection of the social hierarchies that dominated Mesopotamian life. Penalties were often harsher for the lower classes, while the elite could afford to buy their way out of trouble. Sound familiar? Plus, ça change. Plus c'est la même chose, as the French would say, if they existed back then. As you and your fellow scribes dive into the nitty-gritty, it becomes clear that the idealized justice of these codes is often at odds with the gritty realities of law enforcement. Sure, having written laws is a great start, but enforcing them? That's a whole different beast. The city-state of Ur wasn't exactly teeming with a police force ready to jump into action. Instead, it relied heavily on local rulers, community elders, and, you guessed it, scribes to keep the peace. Here's where you see the real power of a scribe. You're not just a passive observer in these legal debates, you're a power broker, a linchpin in the machinery of justice. Your records are the backbone of legal proceedings, the evidence that supports or refutes a claim. It's your responsibility to ensure every detail is accurately captured, every law faithfully transcribed. In a world where literacy is rare, your skills grant you influence, a seat at the table where decisions shape lives. Yet, for all the noble intentions of the Code of Ur-Nammu, the reality on the ground could be much messier. The laws might have been written in stone, well, clay, but human nature is anything but static. Disputes over land, trade, and personal grievances were as common as the Tigris flooding its banks, and sometimes a bit of creative interpretation was required to resolve them. After all, a law is only as good as its enforcer, and not every enforcer is as impartial as the clay tablets would suggest. Beyond the courtroom, the economic context plays a crucial role in shaping these legal codes. The city of Ur was a commercial hub, a crossroads of trade routes that brought wealth and complexity to its society. Economic regulations were necessary to manage the flow of goods, the rights of traders, and the responsibilities of merchants. You, as a scribe, are essential in maintaining this economic order, recording transactions and ensuring that everyone, from the lowest peasant to the wealthiest merchant, knows the rules of the game. But let's not pretend it's all about justice and fairness. The law is also a tool of power, a means for those in charge to maintain control. The scribes and the elite who crafted these laws weren't just interested in justice for justice's sake. They had a vested interest in the stability and prosperity of their city-state, which, let's be honest, often meant keeping the status quo very much in their favour. As the afternoon wears on, the discussion moves from legal theory to practical enforcement. You listen as the scribes debate the merits of various punishments, the effectiveness of fines versus corporal punishment, and the impact of these laws on the social fabric. It's a fascinating glimpse into the minds of those who shaped early civilization, a reminder that while the tools and technologies may change, the fundamental questions of governance and justice remain remarkably consistent. Yet, for all the weightiness of these discussions, there's an undercurrent of dark humour among your fellow scribes. You share a knowing glance with the scribe next to you when the topic shifts to penalties for false testimony. Who among you hasn't bent the truth now and then, especially when a few shekels are on the line? It's a reminder that while laws might aim for order, human nature often dances to its own tune. As the meeting draws to a close, and the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows over the city of Akkad, you gather your tablets and prepare to leave. The debates have been lively, the insights profound, but the work is far from over. Tomorrow, there will be more laws to discuss, more economic regulations to dissect, and more myths to debunk. It's a never-ending cycle, much like the rise and fall of empires themselves. And as you step out into the bustling streets, the sounds of commerce and conversation filling the air, you can't help but appreciate the role you play in this ancient world. You're not just a scribe, you're a chronicler of human complexity, a witness to the unfolding drama of civilization. The clay tablets you inscribe are more than just records. They're the stories of a people striving for order in a world that often defies it. So, as you make your way home, the weight of history resting lightly on your shoulders, remember this: while kings and gods may command the spotlight, it's the scribes who write the script. And in the grand tapestry of time, your role is as vital as any ruler or deity. For in the end, it's not just about the laws we make, but the stories we tell about them. And you, my friend, are the storyteller. As you weave through the bustling streets of Akkad, dusk begins to cast its long shadows over the city, signalling the end of another day in the life of an Akkadian scribe. It's a time of reflection, a moment to ponder the indelible marks you've made, not just on clay tablets, but on the very fabric of history. Because, let's face it, while kings and conquerors might steal the spotlight, it's the scribes who hold the keys to the past. Now, as you make your way home, let's talk legacy, yours and that of the scribes who came before you. The Akkadian scribes were more than just record keepers, they were the architects of human memory. Without them, we'd be floundering in a sea of forgotten events and unrecorded transactions. It's a bit like trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle without the picture on the box. The beauty of scribal work lies in its permanence. Pressing a stylus into wet clay is a commitment. Once it's baked, those impressions endure for millennia, a timeless testament to the power of the written word. Consider the impact of writing on civilization. It's no exaggeration to say that the advent of writing was a game-changer. From cuneiform and hieroglyphs to the alphabets that would follow, writing transformed how humans interacted, communicated, and governed. It turned oral traditions into enduring legacies, giving rise to literature, law, and bureaucracy. Writing didn't just record history, it created it. And you, dear scribe, are part of that grand tradition. Yet, as with all things, there's a flip side. The myths of the Akkadian scribes have their charm, but let's not romanticize too much. The decline of Akkad is often depicted as a dramatic collapse, complete with marauding Gutians and internal strife. But the reality? It was more of a slow fade than a sudden fall. Sure, the Gutians did their fair share of pillaging, but environmental factors played a crucial role too. Climate change, yes, even then, contributed to agricultural decline, pushing the empire to its limits. It's a classic case of nature bats last. And isn't it fascinating how empires rise and fall in cycles? One moment, you're the pinnacle of civilization, and the next, you're a cautionary tale. From the Akkadian Empire to Rome and beyond, history is a series of rinse and repeat narratives. It's almost comforting in a way to know that the patterns of human ambition and folly are as old as time itself. We're all just playing our parts in an endless loop of hubris and humility. As you arrive home, the weight of the clay tablets still etched on your mind, you can't help but muse on how little some things have changed. Sure, we've swapped clay tablets for digital screens and reed styluses for touchscreens, but the essence remains the same. We're still trying to make sense of the world, one bite or wedge at a time. We still record, interpret, and argue over the data. And much like the scribes of yore, we're still grappling with the same questions of justice, power, and legacy. So, as you settle in for the evening, perhaps with a cup of barley beer in hand, hey, even scribes need a little downtime. Take a moment to appreciate your role in this grand narrative. You're not just chronicling history, you're shaping it. And that, my friend, is a legacy worth preserving. As the night deepens, casting its cloak over the city of Akkad, your thoughts drift to the cyclical nature of empires. It's a comforting reminder that while rulers may come and go, the written word endures. The clay tablets you've inscribed today will speak to future generations, offering a glimpse into the world of ancient Mesopotamia. And while trends and technologies may evolve, the fundamental questions of human existence remain strikingly consistent. It's this continuity that gives history its power and its poignancy. The stories of Akkad, with all their triumphs and trials, are more than just records of the past, they're reflections of the human condition. They remind us that in the grand tapestry of time, we're all connected by the threads of our shared experiences. And you, as a scribe, are the weaver of these threads, ensuring that the stories of your time are preserved for posterity. But it's not just about preserving the past, it's about learning from it. The decline of Akkad offers a cautionary tale about the perils of overreach and the fragility of power. It's a reminder that while empires may rise on the strength of their ambitions, they also fall prey to their own hubris. The lessons of history are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago, and it's up to us to heed them. As you prepare to retire for the night, the city of Akkad, now a silhouette against the backdrop of a star-studded sky, you can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. You've done your part in preserving the legacy of a civilization, one clay tablet at a time, and in doing so you've become a part of something much larger than yourself, a timeless narrative that transcends the boundaries of time and space. So here's to the scribes, the unsung heroes of history, whose work has bridged the gap between past and present. As you drift off to sleep, let the knowledge that you've contributed to this enduring legacy be your comfort. For in the end, it's not just the empires we build that define us, but the stories we leave behind. And as the night wears on, the city of Akkad slumbers in the quiet embrace of history, secure in the knowledge that its stories are safe in your capable hands. Sleep well, scribe, for tomorrow brings new challenges, new tales to tell, and new marks to make on the ever-turning wheel of history.